These companies support the Thom Hartmann program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at hellofresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com. Annie's Kit Clubs, creativity delivered right to your door. More info at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. Wild Alaskan Company, delicious, sustainably sourced seafood delivered right to your door. More information at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. And Mack Weldon, reinventing men's basics. More info at mackweldon.com/Tom.
We say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Hidden History of American Healthcare: Why Sickness Bankrupts You and Makes Others Insanely Rich by me. I wrote this book. This is from the introduction, the title, How a Single-Payer Healthcare Systems Help Stop COVID-19. Healthcare systems can be national security systems. Just ask anyone from Taiwan. From January 20th, 2020, the United States, or on January 20, 2020, the United States recorded its first known case of COVID-19 infection. The following day, Taiwan got their first one too. By the end of April, over 1 million Americans were infected with the virus. But Taiwan had recorded only 388 infections, and their last case of local transmission was on April 12th. A few had arrived on aircraft from other countries. All were contained by quarantine. As of this writing in September 2020, there hadn't been a single new case or a single death in Taiwan since April. The economy never shut down and, as of this writing, was projected to have grown nearly 2% in 2020. Business, restaurants, theaters, and sports events were all open. Life was back to normal, albeit a mask-wearing normal. And it was made possible by their national single-payer healthcare system and their citizens' willingness to do their bit for the collective good. Back in the 1980s, Taiwan was on the edge of moving toward a democracy after a military coup in the 1960s. And about 40% of Taiwanese families did not have health insurance. If somebody in a family got sick, the cost of care often wiped out that family, and demands for reform were loud across the nation. Yue Reinhardt was a German-born healthcare economist married to a Taiwanese woman, and he attended a conference on healthcare in Taipei in 1989. His presentation impressed representatives of the government in attendance, and while he was still in town for the conference, they asked him for his best suggestion for a national healthcare system. He and his wife went back to their hotel and discussed the issue in depth, finally deciding that a single-payer national system would be the most cost-effective, efficient, and comprehensive program possible. He shared his thoughts with the government representatives, and the next day he left Taiwan to go back to Princeton, where he was an economic professor. 6 months later, though, a representative of Taiwan's government called him to say that they were going to take up his suggestion and asked him to help craft their healthcare program. He enthusiastically agreed, and by 1995, Taiwan had instituted one of the world's best single-payer healthcare systems. Today, everybody in Taiwan is fully covered for doctor and hospital services. Everybody has a driver's license-like healthcare card, which accesses their entire medical history. They can book a doctor's appointment on any computer terminal in the country, and the entire cost of the system is a bit more than 6% of Taiwan's GDP. For comparison, in the United States, healthcare consumes 24% of our GDP. Because there is no insurance company intermediaries sucking profits off the system in Taiwan. When COVID-19 hit, Taiwan chose not to use the blunt force technique of shutting down their economy and locking people in. Instead, they took on the coronavirus with an aggressive nationwide test and contact trace program tied into the National Health Service database. Every infected person was identified and put into a comfortable quarantine, and every person he or she had come into contact with, even very marginal contacts, were also tested and their contacts traced. By April, just a bit more than 2 months after the first case surfaced, the country had the coronavirus isolated and completely under control. By quarantining inbound visitors to the nation island of 23 million, they were able, as of this writing, to keep it that way. Maintaining public health is one of the most important functions of any nation's healthcare system. Because America's is so fragmented, it's inconceivable that our nation could respond to an epidemic, a pandemic, or another public health disaster with the speed and elegance of Taiwan or any of the world's other nations with single-payer Medicare for all types of systems. It's like Stockholm Syndrome, a friend who's a psychotherapist said, describing the way that Americans have clung for more than 5 generations to a for-profit health insurance system, while the rest of the world figured out how to provide health care to all their citizens at a much lower price. People know it and have become familiar with it, she added. They just can't imagine anything else. It's probably the largest con job ever perpetrated on the American people, one that has cost trillions of dollars and millions of lives. It's been going on since the 1940s. If it were a scientific experiment, it would have been shut down by the ethics review panels generations ago. This experiment in providing health care via a for-profit insurance system has led to the deaths of more Americans than we lost in World War II. Every year, over 500,000 Americans go bankrupt, often losing everything they've worked their entire lives for because somebody in their family got sick. That's 500,000 families a year, every year, for the past few decades. And the coronavirus, of course, has only made things worse. Perhaps most galling, this massive ripoff is costing our entire nation and each of us individually a fortune. Insurance premiums right now make up 22% of all taxable payroll, well above what the cost of Medicare for all would be at around 14% when first put into place, dropping down to around 10% within a few years as previously uninsured people get their health needs up to date.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
A lot in the news today, a lot on our program today. We've got an amazing, crazy alert about a phony Canadian queen for our third hour. I'll just leave it at that. And Dr. J. Famiglietti, I'm sure I'm going to mangle it anyway, is going to be here in our third hour about the impending American water crisis. The Colorado River is getting very, very scary out there. In the second hour, I want to get into the brutal endpoint of white replacement theory that is being preached over on Fox News, Apartheid America. And Jennifer Stefano of the Independent Women's Forum and other right-wing groups is going to drop by and explain to us why it's so important that we allow masks to be optional in our schools. That should be an interesting conversation. It'll be at the top of the next hour. But for our first hour today, Congressman Mark Pocan is with us for the hour. Middays with Mark on the Thom Hartmann program. He represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin in the U.S. House of Representatives. His website, pocan.house.gov. He's a member and former co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. He's on the Appropriations, Education, and Labor Committees in the House, and you can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan. Congressman, welcome back to the program. What's at the top of your list for today? I see you've introduced this amazing piece of legislation to vaccinate the world. Can you tell us about that first?
Sure. Yeah, I'm glad to, Tom. Thanks for having me. COVID Defense Act is a bill that would redirect a little over 1% of the Pentagon budget, 1.3% to be exact, which is about $9.6 billion to international efforts to vaccinate the world. There's an international effort right now with COVAX where countries and others have come up with about $9.6 billion, and that'll vaccinate about 30% of the countries, the 91 poorest countries on the planet. It'll cover 30% of their population. Just by redirecting just a little over 1% of our Pentagon budget from defense contractors and bombs towards the real biggest national security threat we have, which is COVID-19, we can double that number to an additional 30% of the world's population. And by doing so, we accomplish a couple things. One, we're making sure there's less chance to have variants because we're covering more people in the world to stop that from happening, and that protects us here in the United States. But also, it's the right kind of goodwill we should be doing around the world. You look at Afghanistan, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that today. There are plenty of things I think that were done wrong over 20 years. The right thing to do is to do something like this, to help vaccinate the world and help make the world a healthier place. It benefits us, it benefits the world, it benefits our position in the world. So we just introduced that today, and we're hoping that we'll get a lot of sponsors.
So if somebody wants to call their member of Congress at 224-3121 and let their member of the House or the Senate, for that matter, know that they want their vote or their co-sponsorship on this, what should they say?
Support the COVID Defense Act. Sign on to the COVID Defense Act as a co-sponsor. That's the best thing you could do right now. But, really, this is a conversation we've had for a long time, Tom. I think we need to redirect more of our Pentagon dollars towards what other definitions of defense are. The last year and a half, the biggest threat to this country has been COVID-19. And yet all the money we spend is still on faulty F-35s and all this other stuff. Just by directing something as small as a little over 1% of that Pentagon budget, literally 30% of the world, the 91 poorest countries, are going to be vaccinated, which protects us far more from COVID-19 than anything any defense contractor can do. It just makes sense, and I think we need to start having this conversation about using defense dollars for things like climate change, because that's a risk to our country, towards health care, because clearly COVID-19 was a risk to our country. And I think if we do that, we can really do some pretty amazing things. Yeah,
I absolutely agree. Before we pick up phone calls, and by the way, our phone number is 202-808-9925, and Congressman Pocan will be with us for the hour taking your calls. Before we pick up those phone calls, is there anything you want to highlight about what's happening in Congress, other things that you're working on, or just, in general, things you want to make sure people don't miss or know about?
Just the last thing I'd say is if people are going to be calling their member of Congress, they might want to throw in the fact that make sure you take up both of the very important bills together. They're twin bills. The $3.5 trillion bill and the infrastructure bill. Both of them are going to help Americans cut taxes for people with children, going to expand Medicare and child care and other things that are going to help American families. We're going to create jobs while also tackling the climate crisis. And President Biden's proposal is paid for. It taxes the wealthiest and corporations that aren't paying their fair share. It's important both bills go together. It's a crucial vote for us next week. We have a few members that think differently. I think calling their member of Congress about that is good to reinforce.
Yeah, amen. I support both infrastructure bills. Please pass them together.
At the same time.
Yeah,
at the same time.
All righty, let's pick up some phone calls here. Ray in Wheaton, Illinois. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi. People have been talking about how to remove Louis DeJoy from his position, but here's my question. Eugene Debs went to prison for delaying the mail, and DeJoy not only delayed the mail, he destroyed federal property. And why isn't he behind bars right now is what I'm wondering.
Yeah, Ray, the problem is he's making a decision as the Postmaster General to delay mail in order to be more efficient. It's not like he's just delaying mail for the sake of it. He's claiming that's what they have to do financially to keep the post office in service, and he can make that decision as the Postmaster General. I certainly disagree with it. You disagree with it. I think the vast majority of the American people disagree with it, and that's why he's got to go, and we need the Board of Governors to get rid of him. But he does have that within his authority. That's why it's a different situation. He's just making a bad calculus, completely bad calculus on this. The easiest way to fix any problems that the Postal Service may have is to get rid of the ridiculous pre-funding of their employees' benefits 75 years into the future. No other agency has this. No other business has this. You take care of that, you've taken care of most of their problems. And again, I think people really rely on the Postal Service like you are, Ray. We need to get it to work right, and that means you need to get rid of DeJoy.
Bill in Richmond, Virginia. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, sir. Good morning or afternoon, whichever it is. I was just listening to, I think it was Michael Smarconish, and he brought up something interesting from this NBC report, and I think New York Times said the same thing. Why has there not been any comment from any leadership in the Democratic Party about this Afghanistan thing? Now, my Senator Mark Warner from Virginia is going to have a committee on it to find out about the intelligence, but why has there been no comment, no nothing, just kind of like, it was like a non-event.
Bill, one, I would suggest you find new media sources because there have been plenty of comments. I don't know what you're talking about. If you look, I did a cursory check this morning and found all sorts of messaging from some of the lawmakers who are veterans, some of the senior people in various committees, both in the House and Senate. There's lots out there. So there are certainly plenty of comments. I think, my comment I put out there, and I think people like Barbara Lee and others have, is, look, this was not going to succeed with the original mission that was put out by George Bush and Dick Cheney. And every time we try to do nation building, you can't expect to go into a place like Afghanistan where others have tried and leaving Dunkin' Donuts and Disneyland, right? It's not going to happen. And unfortunately, the Republican efforts in the last four presidents, with a lot of misinformation, I think, from the Department of Defense and intelligence, have led us to a place where this was going to happen. Could we have started getting people out of there earlier? Yes, I think there's some things that could have been done better, but it is good that we're getting out of Afghanistan, and hopefully this is a lesson for any future country we might be looking at.
Congressman Mark Pocan with us for the hour, taking your calls at 202-808-9925. It's Middays with Mark on the Thom Hartmann program. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann program.
A member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, Congressman Pocan's website is Pocan, POCAN.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan. And welcome back. Alex in Seattle, listening on KBCS. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you. Firstly, thank you for what you do. Really appreciate all your efforts out there.
Thank you, Alex.
My question is in regards to what's happening with our international shipping issues and supply chain. We are seeing crazy supply chain issues as far as the logistics. And at this point, it feels like maybe in our economy, the tail is wagging the dog, where the shipping industry is a bottleneck that really is hurting us. Is there anything that can be done at an international level that Congress can act on, or is this basically laissez-faire? It is what it is, because we've seen our containers personally go from $2,000 a container from overseas to up to over $20,000 per container, same material on that vessel. So it's interesting. Is there anything that can be done?
Yeah, Alex, I'll tell you, part of the problem I think that you didn't mention, and part of why this is happening is, basically in many ways the United States reopened around June. We've seen it in our own business. I'm a small business owner, and we're having the supply chain issues that many other people are having because the demand suddenly came open after a lot of time with COVID. And because of that, there's a whole ripple effect of what people have. It's not like people still had things in inventory because they also weren't making things if there wasn't demand. And because of that, especially in shipping, they're able to make quite a nice profit on that as we're trying to get goods in. But it is something that I know so many small businesses are facing. I understand what you're saying. I don't know if I have a legislative fix because what you need is more lines of transportation, but we also need more of the goods that are out there. Trying to source things right now, especially things like in our business, we do a lot of American and union-made T-shirts and things. Boy, we can spend an hour trying to find the shirts that we used to be able to just go on one website, order, and in 5 minutes we were done. It's just part of the reopening process, and I think it's going to get better. But clearly right now we're in a crunch.
Congressman, we have about a minute to the break. I'm wondering if you think that part of the solution to this problem, or maybe part of the opportunity that this moment has provided us, as China is having fits with COVID right now and shipping is up and down and everything else, is an opportunity to bring our factories back home. Bernie points out that, as of, I think it was 2010, 50,000 factories had gone overseas. I think the number now is over 60,000. Repatriate, so that we don't need a supply chain, or at least one that's external to the United States. Undo neoliberalism.
Absolutely, especially around things like medicines and drugs, things that are really of also national security importance. We should be able to have that produced here in the United States and not rely on India or China for that, which we do all too often. But we're even seeing this, Tom, in, like I said, I source American-made and union-made stuff a lot for our business. Mm-hmm. We're having supply chain issues there because there wasn't inventory, because there wasn't demand, which I totally understand as a small business owner. But right now it's all hitting, and we're having some of these problems. So
I understand that, like, for example, most American-made clothing is actually using cloth that was made overseas.
Yes, that is still very true.
Yeah.
It's interesting trying to find U.S. suppliers. We've made a real goal of it. I found, for example, a rug company in the Carolinas, things like that. But it's so far and few between, and it would be great if we had more suppliers here. I think they would find good business.
Yeah, I'm with you. It was a very different world 40 years ago. We'll be right back. Congressman Mark Pocan with us. Stick around. Share the Thom Hartmann program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann program. So back in the day, and I mean back in the 1780s, literally, when the Constitutional Convention was happening in Philadelphia in the summer of 1787, there was this debate about the quality of the vote. Whether people who only landowners should be allowed to vote, stuff like that. And, in order to ensure that well-informed people who really care about voting are the only ones voting. It didn't pass. It was rejected by the framers of the Constitutional Convention, this idea that only landowners should be allowed to vote. Never made it in the Constitution. But a variation on this is now being proposed in the Arizona legislature. And State Representative John Kavanaugh, who's the chair of the committee that's pushing this legislation, says the quality of the vote is important. We have to look at the quality of votes as well. I've got a new video all about this for the supporters of our program over at thomhartmann.com. Check it out. And welcome back. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. And David in Washington, D.C., you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, how you doing, Congressman? Thank you, Tom. And my question is, look, I am getting my mail late. I knew someone talked about the post office earlier, but this type of stuff can mess my credit rating up and everything. And how in the world can someone think that shutting down one of the best delivery computer systems on the damn planet is going to do anything decent for the people?
Congressman?
My creditors don't care. They want to be paid on time. My billers, they want to be paid on time.
Yeah.
And now shutting services down, I can't do it.
I hear you, David. And, that's one of a multitude of problems with having a delayed mail service. The goal has been by many Republicans to try to privatize it. If they can make it fail, then they can have private industry come and pick that up, and we'll all pay more eventually for that service. People in rural areas will suffer greatly if that happens. And, we have to remember one of the few federal services that is outlined in the Constitution is the Postal Service. So we have to do everything we can to protect it. I would say, again, as you reach out to your elected officials, and I hope that everyone does that on a regular basis, raise this issue. The pressure has to be so immense. The difficulty is we are a step removed from it, as it is the Board of Governors that has to do it. But I think this has gone on way too long. We need to really build that pressure up to a crescendo.
Pam in Chicago, you're on the air with Representative Pocan.
Hello.
Hey,
really
Pam.
quickly, hi. I just want to say we have to acknowledge Representative Barbara Lee, who was initially against that war in Afghanistan. and she laid it out very eloquently, and I think she needs some special recognition. So, Representative, to you, could you be as specific as possible? When we talk about having both infrastructure bills passed, you use the word supported. I'm hearing from the other side that they want the roads bill signed first, and they won't move on anything else until that's done. And then on the progressive side, I'm hearing that, no, we've got to have the human infrastructure bill agreed to and signed. So what does that look like specifically? Both being signed at the same time? Or when you say support, I just want to make sure we can get them both done.
No, thank you, Pam. It's a great question. First of all, I completely agree with you on Barbara Lee. Barbara Lee speaks for me. She always has, and that was a very brave vote she took, and she was right 20 years ago, and she's still right today, especially on Pentagon spending. On this issue, so what's happening is there are 9 moderates who signed a letter and said, no, we've got to take the infrastructure bill up first. And when you have a 3-seat majority in the House, clearly you can start doing the math. You realize there could be some problems. The real problem is if we do the infrastructure bill, already this is a watered-down infrastructure bill from what Joe Biden had wanted. These are twin bills that Nancy Pelosi has said all along, and she's maintained and still maintains they have to be passed together. We need the Senate to also pass the larger $3.5 trillion bill, or whatever it may exactly be. It could be slightly different, along with this bill, because otherwise, if you pass the infrastructure bill, the bipartisan so-called infrastructure bill, you may never get to the other bill, thanks to people like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. So we don't trust them. If you remember the old Popeye cartoon when Wimpy would say, I'd gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today, that's how we feel about this. If we do the infrastructure bill, you may never see the bill that extends the child tax cut for American families that's going to lift half of the children in this country out of poverty. You're never going to see the child care money, the expansion of Medicare. All the other things that are in there will not happen if we don't do them together. So it's really simple. This is what Joe Biden wants. This is what Nancy Pelosi wants. This is what Democrats in general want. There should be no Democrat who doesn't want what's in that bill. So let's do them together. Let's do it right. That means we have the Senate vote on both. The House will vote on both. They'll go to the president together. But to do one before the other risks the other one happening. And that's why the bills have to be done together. That's the message.
Joe in St. Petersburg, Florida. You're on the air with Representative Pocan. And I think we have about a minute left here.
Okay, I just wanted to say I'm having a problem with my representatives. I've got one good representative in Congress, Charlie Crist, but my other 2 Congress representatives are Rick Scott and Rubio. So, I've been calling them, but, how much good is it going to do when they are so embedded in the oil companies and the NRA and all the things where our money is going to subsidize the oil companies and not to giving to the poor of this country, the working man, the kind of things that are in that bill. How do I convince them when they're so embedded in what they've been doing for so many years, the oil companies?
Thanks,
and
Joe.
NRA.
Let's get the answer here. Thank you.
Yeah, and you've hit the nail on the head with this one, because that is the problem. The reason that some people don't want that bill, it's not because there's not good things in there, because the public is wildly supportive of almost everything that's being proposed to be in that bill, which, by the way, Bernie Sanders helped write. It's because of the special interests that don't want to pay their fair share of taxes and the wealthy, because that's how Joe Biden funds it. So they're getting in the ear of some members of Congress and the Senate. You keep the pressure up, because eventually, if those members get enough context, you watch them, they'll redirect why they're going to change their opinion, but they'll cave. We have to keep the pressure on members of Congress.
Congressman Mark Pocan with us. Okay, stick around.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's Middays with Mark, our regular visit with Congressman Mark Pocan of Wisconsin, a member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, pocan.house.gov.
Hey, it's Thom Hartmann. We're reading from A Dark Money, The Hidden History of the Billionaires Behind the Rise of the Radical Right.
in today's Thom Hartmann University Book Club. This is from Chapter 11, page 271. The official opening of the 112th Congress took place on January 5th, 2011, when Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, handed off an oversized ceremonial gavel to her successor, John Boehner. But a new era of ultra-conservative billionaire influence had already begun. Before the public swearing-in ceremony got underway, David Koch, whose donor network had spent at least $130.7 million on winning a Republican majority, was in the new Speaker-to-be's office, ornate office, chatting amiably with his staff. The People's House was under new management, and critics would suggest new ownership. While Koch was a very public presence on the Capitol, his political adjutant, Tim Phillips, the president of Americans for Prosperity, was deep in the inner sanctum of the congressional committee that mattered most to the bottom line of Koch Industries. Phillips's most important destination that day was the House Energy and Commerce Committee, which under the new Republican majority had now increased its power to block President Obama's environmental agenda in Congress. The committee could bury progress on climate change and harass the EPA for the foreseeable future. And then just jumping through a little anecdote about Lee Fong and David Koch, they continue. In Plutocrats, The Rise of the New Global Super-Rich and the Fall of Everyone Else, journalist Krista Freeland describes how those with massive financial resources almost universally use them to secure politics and policies beneficial to their interests, often at the expense of the less well-off. In the United States, a number of studies have shown that in recent years, this tendency has distorted politics in very specific ways. In a study he conducted for the nonpartisan Sunlight Foundation, the political scientist Lee Drutman found that increasingly concentrated wealth in America resulted in more polarization and extremism, especially on the right. Very rich benefactors in the Republican Party were far more opposed to taxes and regulations than the rest of the country. He discovered the more Republicans depend upon 1% of the 1% donors, the more conservative they tend to be. The 112th Congress soon unfolded as a case study of what David Frum, an advisor to the former President George W. Bush, described as the growing and, in his view, destructive influence of the Republican Party's radical rich. The radicalization of the party's donor base, he observed, has propelled the party to advocate policies that were more extreme than anything since Barry Goldwater and his 1964 presidential campaign. It also led Republicans in Congress to try tactics they would never have dared use before, end quote. Hard data supported this. Harvard's Theta Scott poll found that the House took the biggest leap to the far right since political scientists began recording quantitative measurements of legislators' positions. There was no better example than the Koch's newly won influence over the House Energy and Commerce Committee. In the previous Congress, the panel had been chaired by Henry Waxman, the liberal Democrat from California, who had quarterbacked the House's successful passage of the cap and trade bill, only to see it die in the Senate. Now the new Republican leadership stocked the committee with oil industry advocates, many of whom owed huge campaign debts to the Kochs. Koch Industries PAC was the single largest oil and gas industry donor to members of the panel, outspending even ExxonMobil. It had donated to 22 of the committee's 31 Republican members and 5 of its Democratic members, too. In addition, 5 out of the 6 Republican freshmen on the committee had received outside support from Americans for Prosperity. Meanwhile, many of the new committee members had signed an unusual pledge swearing fealty to the Koch's agenda. They promised to vote against any kind of carbon tax unless it was offset by comparable spending cuts, an unlikely scenario. The no climate tax pledge was invented by Americans for Prosperity in 2008, when the Supreme Court cleared the way for the EPA to regulate greenhouse gases as it does other pollutants. The Koch's pledge was modeled on the enormously successful one that the anti-tax crusader Grover Norquist had used to intimidate Republican lawmakers from raising taxes. But in this instance, it served not a cause so much as a company. By the start of the legislative session in 2011, fully 156 members of Congress had signed the Koch brothers' no climate tax pledge. Many returning members of the House Energy and Commerce Committee had already taken the pledge, and of the 12 new Republicans on the panel, 9 were signatories, including 5 of the 6 freshmen. A prime example of the symbiotic relationship between the Kochs and the committee was Morgan Griffith, who had defeated Rick Boucher in the district that represented Saltville, Virginia, and was among the new wave of appointees to the Energy and Commerce Committee who were openly indebted to the Koch brothers for their seats. Americans for Prosperity operatives were guests of honor at a victory rally soon after the election, at which Griffith gushed, quote, "I'm just thankful that y'all helped me out in so many ways," end quote.
The Koch's investment soon paid off. Once in office, Griffith became an outspoken skeptic of mainstream climate science, drawing national ridicule for lecturing scientific experts as they testified before Congress that they needed to consider the possibility that Mesopotamia and the Vikings owed their success to global warming, and the melting ice caps on Mars showed that humans were not its cause on Earth. Congressman Griffith became a lead player in the House Republicans' war on the EPA, demanding that the agency be reined in. Within a month after he took office, he and other House Republicans gutted the EPA budget by a punishing 27%. Dark Money, The Hidden History of the Billionaires Behind the Rise of the Radical Right by Jane Mayer.
Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. So a while ago at Davos, Michael Dell, the computer billionaire who started out selling computers out of his dorm room in college. I was running CompuServe forums back in the day. This is in the late 70s or the early 80s, and he was selling them on CompuServe in my forums. And, now he's worth billions. And somebody asked him, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is proposing a 70% tax bracket for people who make the kind of money you make. What do you think of that? And his response was, a 70% tax rate? Name a country where that ever worked. Ever. And it turns out there is such a country, and apparently Michael Dell didn't know this. I think a lot of Americans don't know this, that there was a country that had its greatest period of prosperity in its entire history, with a top tax rate that was above 70%. In fact, it hit 90% for more than half the time. And that was the United States of America. It's a new video over at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. Maverick in Edmonds, Washington. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, did you say Maverick? I didn't hear you.
I did. You are on the air.
Hey, good morning. Hey, Tom, if I could I apologize for something I said last week?
Probably not necessary, but, if you want.
Well, I made a crack about, I was trying to ridicule that whole thing about the 72 virgins to the martyr, and I made a crack about you get 72 mothers-in-law. And after I thought about that, I thought, that was insensitive. And
I think you're being overly concerned here, Maverick. Anyhow, your question for Congressman Pocan.
All right. This might take two brains. You had this great assertion that, and I've used this many times in my discussions with some conservatives that I know, and that's that whole thing about the, name a law that was, a bill that was proposed by a Republican, passed through a Republican majority in Congress, and signed into law by a Republican president, and that law benefits more than 51% of it benefits the working man. And that hasn't happened for at least 40 years. Well, my follow-up to that is, what was the last law that met those requirements? Can you help me?
Congressman?
I don't know offhand, going back 40 years. I can tell you the last law that probably benefited over 50% of the people very directly was the American Rescue Plan that Democrats put forward. But, that's the bill that we passed earlier this year that put money in people's pockets. It put shots in people's arms. It put kids back into school safely, which was the important part, and it put people into jobs. And that bill, absolutely, by the definition of supporting a majority of the people, did that. These next two bills that we need to do together, the infrastructure and the broader human infrastructure bills, are also going to do that. So it's rare. I've been doing this for 30 years, local, state, and federal government, to see this much activity happen in this little time. This really is pretty transformational. So by your definition, Maverick, these bills, the two and the one we did, would all meet that criteria, at least as far as benefiting people.
But no Republicans are voting for them, so they still have
maybe on the infrastructure a few, but that's about it.
Yeah, okay. Steve in Ocala, Florida, you're on the air with Representative Pocan. Steve?
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, you're on the air.
I'm sorry. I hate to beat a dead horse, Congressman. Good morning to both of you. Is there any update on the third stimulus payment? I'm on SSDI. Got the first two direct deposit. Third one haven't received. And I did reach out to Daniel Webster, my congressman, but he had no information to offer. Are they still issuing, or do we have to wait till the spring and file a tax return? I normally don't file because I don't make enough money.
Yeah, Stephen, all I can tell you, my office deals with things like that. I don't deal with those directly, but his office should help you with that. If there's a way that they can get that, if they can't, and it's going to have to come through taxes, and that's the way it should be. But that's something. Doesn't matter if it's a Democrat or a Republican. Your member of Congress should be able to help you navigate it if you did not get that stimulus payment. So, they should be giving you a definitive answer one way or the other. And if they're not, you may have to unfortunately try your U.S. senator.
Morris in Long Beach, listening on KPFK. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good morning to my progressive family. Congressman, do you think this is a good idea? What I'm talking about is Senator Feinstein. She's 88 years old. We've got a California recall out here, and a new guy can come in through the back door, Republican, and appoint a new senator. Now, if that should take place, that would affect or kill the entire, in my opinion, the entire Biden agenda. And I'm sure Papa Joe got to be thinking about this, and I'm thinking he should put some money into that race. Do you share my concerns? And thank you.
Joe, I'll be honest, I have not watched it super closely, but your analysis is dead on, right? If for some reason that Governor Newsom is recalled and a Republican takes that and they can appoint, should something happen to Dianne Feinstein, which at 88 you have to have those conversations, it would absolutely stall the agenda. So I do believe there's a full court effort on that. But, if you're in Long Beach, you probably know on the ground what's happening. I certainly hope they don't recall the governor in California, but a lot of effort should be put on that for the very argument you made.
Stephen Lamp, if I'm saying that right, Missouri, Lampe?
It's Lampe.
Lampe, okay. Hey, Steve, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thank you. Yes, Congressman, I was wondering if there might be some way to help keep from sending our Americans into combat overseas in the future by passing legislation to make sure that the first ones to go would be sons and daughters and nieces and nephews of congressmen.
Yeah, I think that would be hard to do. I understand the sentiment. I think what we really have to learn out of what's happening right now is so often when we go in and try to do so-called nation building, that's not maybe the role of the United States military. And, I think there was a terrible direction given by Dick Cheney and George Bush at the time when this happened. It was not ever going to likely succeed, and president after president just kept pouring resources in there, not maybe being given the blunt truth by some of our U.S. agencies on what's happening. And Joe Biden did the right thing by removing the troops, and we got to keep that in mind if we ever want to do this anywhere else. There are purposes for troops overseas, but I think what we did in Afghanistan likely was not that purpose. And now we have to really keep the focus on, getting people out of there. So I understand the point you're trying to make. I don't know if that would be even constitutional. It's certainly not likely to pass, but I certainly understand the point you're making.
Paul in Woodinville, Washington. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, I'd like to ask the elephant in the room question, which is, how is it that we train an Afghan military of 300,000 strong over a period of 20 years and not know that they're not going to perform, that they're not going to fight? I mean, any training I've ever been through, of many kinds, you cannot demonstrate the skill set and not do it. You can't fake it. You cannot fake military training and then just not fight. So my suspicion is, I suspect that it has been known all along from the very beginning that they would not fight. And that's why we've been told all these years we're not going to stay. That's why John McCain said we're going to be there for 100 years, because everybody knew as soon as you pull out this 1 2x4, the whole roof is going to collapse. And that's what I think that's what we have not been told. We've known this all along. I'd like your reaction.
Yeah, Paul, you may very likely be right. There's a reason why Donald Trump and Joe Biden, which probably agree on very, very little, both agreed on it was necessary to remove troops. Donald Trump did it in a very Trump way, which was problematic and never would have worked in the way he was trying to propose, and Joe Biden did what he needed to do. But, there's no question what we were doing wasn't going to work. I don't think we got the right information from whether it be Department of Defense or intelligence to presidents. And, hopefully this is one more reason why we need to repeal those AUMFs, the authorizations from 20 years ago, too, because right now we're still giving presidents the unilateral authority when clearly the Constitution says it's up to Congress to do this. That also has to happen, and I think there's growing support in a bipartisan way to do that.
Dave in Pittsburgh, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello, Representative Pocan. My godson was born with half a heart. So I'm wondering, is there a way we can push the FDA to put through a waiver saying we won't hold the manufacturers nor the FDA responsible for any side effects of the COVID vaccine for trying to get him this shot before it's fully authorized?
For kids?
Yes.
Yeah, boy, I think that the focus has been, Dave, on just trying to move these forward so we can get more people covered. And I think, we're awaiting that expansion of the age group that can get the COVID vaccine. And now I think what I just heard today, it sounds like is, by the week of, I think, September 20th, there may be authorization for people to get that third shot beyond just the small population right now, people at risk, but to try to get people that booster. I don't know of any efforts to do what you're recommending. I think one of the problems is the FDA, I think has to change a bit of its focus on how it looks at things, and there has been some interesting suggestions out there. I'm on a committee that has some oversight over it, and I think there is some reform we need to have happen over there.
There are, as of Saturday, there were 1,902 American children hospitalized with COVID. That's pretty serious.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I hope they can get something going for kids right away. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us, taking your calls for the hour. Middays with Mark on the Thom Hartmann program. You can tweet him at Rep, as in Representative, R-E-P, Rep, Mark Pocan. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And his website is pocan.house.gov. Middays with Mark, right after this. And welcome back. 45 minutes past the hour. Stasha in Tacoma, Washington. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good morning, gentlemen. I'm a recently retired emergency physician. I've spent my whole adult life in healthcare. And one thing I can say, first of all, is that politicians have no business trying to dictate healthcare for anybody, really. Secondly, I'm starting to wonder if it isn't time to make mandatory vaccinations. It's not just for the protection of the population here, it's also for protection for the world population, because the more the virus replicates, the more likely we are to get variants that we can't treat. And so it would seem to me we're being irresponsible to the world population. And the last thing is that I don't believe this country was really based on I can do what I want even if it hurts the people around me, which seems to be kind of what's going on with the non-vaxxers, non-maskers.
Yeah. Sasha, let me answer it in this way. I've seen a number of things that tell me if we did a mandatory vaccine, you may even get greater pushback. I think what I've found is when you look at, they've had some studies saying, if you were given $100, would you get a vaccine? I think 12% of the people said that might entice them. Whether or not you could fly in an airplane, 41% of the people said then they would get a vaccine. I think there's other incentives we can do first. But I also would go back to the very beginning of the show when I talked about a bill I introduced today, the COVID Defense Act, which would take just a little over 1% of the current Pentagon budget and put that towards global efforts with COVAX that would cover 30% of the world's population in 91 of the poorest countries. That would double the efforts right now that are out there. That goes to exactly what you're saying. We're going to have variants as long as we have COVID out there. We have to actually help get this done across the world. And while our numbers are increasing in the U.S. and there's other things we can do, we need to focus globally on this, and I think that is something that should be prioritized to address the very concerns that you have. And thank you so much for what you've done all your life in that role as emergency physician, especially the last year and a half. I can't imagine how difficult that's been. Congressman,
we have just a little less than a minute left. Tell us a little more about your bill. How many people are co-sponsoring or co-signing it? What challenge does it face? What opportunity do we have here? What committee is it going to come out of?
Today. So this is the first day for people to sign on to the bill. So we don't know how many are signed on yet because it just circulated. But what we did is we looked at the international efforts around COVAX, and they had raised about $9.6 billion that would lead to billions of vaccine shots that would protect 30% of the world by early 2022. That's good, but it's still going to lead to additional variants. By doubling that amount, which is, again, that 1.3% of the Pentagon budget, you'll get to 60% of the populations in those countries, and that is getting much closer to where we need to make sure there's not additional variants. I think it is incumbent on this country to do that, not just for our own self-interest, to stop variants, but also to show how America can do its best by doing that rather than just putting troops on the ground in countries.
Vaccine diplomacy.
Absolutely. Vaccine diplomacy. I'm going to steal that.
Yeah, please do. Congressman Mark Pocan with us for the hour, taking your calls. Middays with Mark here on the Thom Hartmann program. We'll be back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan in just a moment. I just have to take 1 minute and read an ad over on the commercial Sirius section on the M side. I'll be right back. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. So people wonder, why militias all of a sudden? How is it that all kinds of Americans are showing up with assault weapons in the Capitol building trying to assassinate the Vice President of the United States and the Speaker of the House of Representatives and stop the counting of the presidential votes, the Electoral College votes? Where did this come from? The last time we saw an armed uprising against the federal government in the United States was 1861. It was the Confederacy. Is this a Confederacy rising again? Well, yeah, there is a huge white supremacist element to it. In fact, I'd say it's one of the primary animating impulses. But what really got these things going, these militias going, was the Heller decision written by the opinion written by Anthony Scalia and published on June 26, 2008. And it has crazy language in it, basically begging for militias. I share it with you in a special video over at thomhartmann.com. Check it out. And welcome back, taking your phone calls for Congressman Pocan. And let's see here. Tom in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Representative Pocan. I just want to say real quick, my representative doesn't even live in my district, and that's the Pennsylvania 14th. And I was wondering if you could start legislation that would limit media consolidation or try to reverse it. It seems like 6 to 9 companies control 80 to 90% of what we see, read, and hear.
Yeah, Tom, I would take your conversation, though, and even take it up to a 30,000-foot level. I mean, we need more antitrust legislation and more looked at consolidation and single control with companies. There was a bill recently that went through the Judiciary Committee. David Cicilline's has a bill, and it was an interesting configuration. It was more mainstream and progressive Democrats aligning with some folks on the right, and then some more corporate-leaning folks, looking to Silicon Valley and others opposing that. But we absolutely need to stop consolidations, whether it be in media or in a lot of other industries, because at the end of the day, it doesn't benefit the American consumer. Much more needs to be done in this area. And, on top of that, I would just mention, the social media specifically, where people seem to be getting their news now. You can very easily never see anything other than certain aspects of your news, and I think that's also pretty detrimental to efforts right now.
Steve in New Boston, Michigan, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. I'm wondering, talking about jobs in America, coming back here, that do we have the natural resources and the technology and the workforce available here in the United States to manufacture pillows? Because a Google search revealed that a well-leading and well-heavily advertised pillow company whose CEO is claiming that the 2020 elections were stolen, actually is doing business by having his pillows manufactured in China and exported to the United States. So my guess is this is happening because we don't have the natural resources, the technology, or the workforce available to manufacture these right here and put Americans to work. Is that what the problem is? I'll take my answer offline. Thank you.
I liked your point, Steve. Hypocrisy is definitely rampant among many of the MAGA crowd. My pillow, not to be excluded from that. This is just part of the problem that honestly I think is affecting us politically. I could go way long on this, and I won't, but in our rural areas of places like Wisconsin, there used to be a couple decades ago a manufacturer that employed many of the people with good family-supporting jobs. And when we started sending all these jobs overseas, whether it was to make pillows or anything else, we ruined much of that rural community, the economics of that rural community. So now you can have a home-based business or you can have an agrarian business, but it's very different. And, don't forget, they don't always have broadband, which is why we need to expand broadband and a lot of other things. And that's led to some of the resentment in those areas. So politically, it's been easy for people to believe this, that brown or black-skinned person took my job, and that becomes the emphasis rather than the reality, which is I think what you're pointing out, is greedy corporations who sent jobs overseas just to save some money so they can pay their top brass and their shareholders even more. It's a much bigger issue, I think, that we need to talk about a lot more, but it's really, I think, one of the main things that's affecting us in a political way in these rural communities.
Mike, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Congressman. Hey, Congressman, my question is going to be, who is going to get fired from the Afghanistan debacle? I mean, you're a representative, and you fund all these agencies that have been lying to the American people for 20 years. But yet, I don't see any repercussions. I don't see any fallout. I wonder why a percentage of the people in the United States don't trust America government is because you've been lying to us forever. And you're the person who's responsible to make sure that someone answers for these lies.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mike. I think you're going to see lots of reviews of what have happened. I think what you're going to find, this is my guess, is that Department of Defense might have often given a rosier picture than what was really going on. Intelligence, in some ways, some of the intelligence agencies have been the most critical of what happened, but there probably were some failures there as well. And most recently, I think, there probably, unfortunately, were probably some failures at the Secretary of State level in not, getting people out of there sooner and staging that out rather than waiting till this late date to really accomplish that. But, the real fault was that we just had administration after administration for 20 years keep the presence there because that was easier than ripping the Band-Aid off. And, Joe Biden, I still think, did the right thing, could have been executed better. But you're right. We should find out why we spent 20 years there and all the lives that were lost and the money that was spent. It wasn't in our best interest.
And getting in the first place. I mean,
yeah. Well, and seriously, it goes back to, Tom, you're right. I mean, what Dick Cheney, and I say Dick Cheney first, even before George Bush, their mission out there, with the directive they had was wrong. And the fact that they never would do any power sharing or anything else, any kind of reaching out to the Taliban, mistake was made after mistake. But that directive, those original directives, were the main reason why this was never going to work.
Yeah, absolutely. Congressman Pocan, thanks so much for dropping by today. It's great having you with us, and best of luck on your, what's the name of the bill again?
The COVID Defense Act.
COVID Defense Act. And please reach out and let your members of Congress know that the COVID Defense Act has been dropped today, and it's worth supporting. Congressman, good luck. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Appreciate it, Tom, as always.
My pleasure, as always. We'll be right back. Stick around. We got a debate about masks.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at hellofresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com. Annie's Kit Clubs, creativity delivered right to your door. More info at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. Wild Alaskan Company, delicious, sustainably sourced seafood delivered right to your door. More information at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. And Mack Weldon, reinventing men's basics. More info at mackweldon.com/Tom.
We say fight back!
Our book today is The Poisoned City, Flint's Water and the American Urban Tragedy by Anna Clark. This is from the prologue. On a hot day in the summer of 2014 in the Civic Park neighborhood where Pastor R. Sherman McCathern preached in Flint, Michigan, water rushed out of a couple of fire hydrants. Puddles formed on the dry grass and splashed the skin of the delighted kids who ran through it. But the spray looked strange. The water was coming out dark as coffee for hours, McCathern remembered. The shock of it caught in his throat. Something is wrong here. Something had been wrong for months. That spring, Flint, under the direction of state officials, turned off the darkening water that it had relied on for the drinking water that it had relied on for nearly 50 years. The city planned to join a new regional system called the Carragnondi Water Authority, and while it waited for the KWA to be built, it began bringing in its water from the Flint River. McCathern didn't pay much attention to the politicking around all this. He had enough to worry about with his busy parish. But after the switch, many of his neighbors grew alarmed at the water that flowed from their kitchen faucets and shower heads. They packed public meetings, wrote questioning letters, and protested at City Hall. They filled clear plastic bottles in their taps to show how the water looked brown or orange and sometimes had particulates floating in it. Showering seemed to be connected with skin rashes and hair loss. The water smelled foul. A sip of it put the taste of a cold metal coin on your tongue. But the authorities said everything was all right and you could drink it, so people did, McCathern said later. Residents were advised to run their faucets for a few minutes before using the water to get a clean flow. But as the months went by, the city plant tinkered with treatment and issued a few boil water advisories. State environmental officials said again and again that there was nothing to worry about. The water was just fine. Whatever their senses told them, whatever the whispers around town, whatever Flint's troubled history with powerful institutions telling them what was best for them, this wasn't actually hard for people like McCathern to believe. Public water systems are one of this country's most heroic accomplishments, a feat so successful that it's almost invisible. By making it a commonplace for clean water to be delivered to homes, businesses, and schools, we have saved untold lives from what today sound like antiquated diseases in a Charles Dickens novel: cholera, dysentery, typhoid fever. Here in Flint, it was instrumental in turning General Motors, founded in 1908 in Vehicle City, as the town was known, into a global economic giant. The advancing underground network of pipes defined the growing city and its metropolitan region, which boasted of being home to one of the strongest middle classes in the entire United States.
McCatherine is a tall, bald man with a thin mustache and a scratchy rasp in his baritone voice. At the time of the water switch, he had led the non-denominational Joy Tabernacle Church for about 15 years. It was founded in the YMCA in downtown Flint, where it held baptisms in the swimming pool. But in 2009, it made a home in Civic Park, where a Presbyterian church closed after 85 years and gave its sanctuary over to the young and hopeful congregation. By then, Civic Park, one of America's oldest subdivisions, was a desert of deserted, historically significant homes, the pastor said. Built between 1917 and 1919 by General Motors and DuPont and Company, along curving tree-lined boulevards, the tidy houses were designed for Flint's auto workers and their families. But over the years, the neighborhood was blighted by vacancy. Empty 2 stories with lurching front porches and crumbling roofs sat alongside crisply painted homes where Flint residents, they sometimes call themselves Flintoids or Flintstones, still live their lives. When the sound of gunshots on the street outside interrupted services, McCatherine gave a nod to the church musicians, urging them to play louder. Some called Joy Tabernacle a thug church, he said, but McCatherine saw the good. The young men filling his pews built a proud society, if not by getting their names on the honor roll, then by tagging their names with spray paint. In the end, people just want to be seen. The ghosts of the past went well beyond Civic Park. Between General Motors and the United Auto Workers, the city had been a flourishing hub for American innovation. There were more than 100 different manufacturing establishments in town. 10 of them employed at least 1,000 people each. And they not only made automobiles, but paints, varnishes, tools, dyes, cotton, textiles, and a wealth of other products. Flint had one of the highest per capita incomes in the entire nation. And despite being severely segregated, it was a magnet for African-American migrants from the South. When Vice President Hubert Humphrey stopped by during the campaign for the 1964 presidential election, he praised Flint for, quote, zooming ahead with unbelievable growth and progress. Workers earned wages that are very good, Humphrey said, and, quote, because of the great labor management program in the community over many years, there has been a constant rise in the standard of living, end quote. Away from the assembly lines and the executive suites, the people of Flint felt that the city just shouldn't be a place to work. It should also be a place to thrive. Charles Stewart Mott, an auto pioneer who became GM's single largest stockholder and 3-term mayor, created a nationally renowned community schools program that provided education, skills building workshops, and social influence and social services. The book, The Poison City.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the second hour of our program. Well, school is starting. It has already started in many parts of the United States. Over in Slidell, Louisiana, for example, the local TV station WDSU reporting it's the parents' worst nightmare. 4 kids, not 1, but 4 kids testing positive for COVID-19. The youngest, 5-month-old Abigail, and 2-year-old Shar are currently still at Children's Hospital in New Orleans, where there are no beds available. Abigail is on an assisted breathing machine. She's 2 years old. They're talking about mom and dad. Mom and dad were both vaccinated, but mom says, my children went from laughing and playing babies to laying around. Every time they moved, they coughed. They couldn't breathe. I cannot wait until my babies are home. And she is praying that all the kids will have a safe school year. This is a real challenge for us. How do we keep our children safe? On the line with us is Jennifer Stefano, Vice President and Chief Strategist at the Commonwealth Foundation, commonwealthfoundation.org, and a fellow with the Independent Women's Forum, IWF.org. You can tweet her at Jennifer Stefano, Stefano, or at Liberty number 4 PA, or at IWF. Jennifer, welcome to the program. So what is your plan for protecting our children who can't get vaccinated yet, and for protecting the people that the children come into contact with, like my 91-year-old mother-in-law who wants to hang out with her grandchildren?
Yeah, so first, the thing we have to do as parents is make decisions in our lives about whether we should or shouldn't let our children be exposed to someone who might be vulnerable. And that's a tough decision, Tom. I completely get it. I'm around people who might have high risks, and they said, I'm done living like this, and I want to be around people I love. And so I think that's a personal one-to-one decision that we all have to make in our lives, and it's tough. This is in no way easy because there are...
But that has nothing to do with the schools. I'm asking the question,
No.
how do we protect our children? Well, I added my 91-year-old mother-in-law, but you know, it would be coming from the schools. My understanding is that your position is that we should not mandate masks in schools, and I'm trying to understand that.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate it. I think what we should do is allow local communities and local schools and parents to be involved in making these decisions. And here's why. Because I do like the question of how we should protect our children, but it's not just against COVID. Because as you know, Tom, and as I know, I went and looked at the number of suicides in 2020. Now, while a lot of childhood diseases and other illnesses went down in 2020, the one thing that went up is suicide, suicide attempts, and suicide ideation.
Jennifer, are you trying to tell me that if we ask kids to wear masks in school, they're going to commit suicide?
No,
is that your argument, really?
Is that there are a lot. No, that's not my argument. Let me finish. I want to finish the sentence.
Sure.
I think there are multiple things that we have to think about for the health and well-being of our children, COVID being one of them. And we have vaccines to help that. And then we have, there has been not met, well, there are actually, the CDC has now approved the vaccines for 12 years old and up. So some of our children can be vaccinated if parents choose to allow that. And I think that you have to look at the child holistically. And I think the power belongs in the hands of the parents in the local community. I think Florida has the best solution. The Florida Tax Credit Scholarship Organization said, if you feel you are being COVID harassed, whether it is because your children are not going to a school where they're wearing masks or your children are going to a school where they're mandating masks, we will give you a tax credit scholarship that your children can go to a different school that suits your needs. Because, again, my children
Vouchers
have
for
dyslexia.
Private schools? This is your solution, really? So do you think that...
Elizabeth, wait a minute. It's Elizabeth Warren's solution in her book, The Two-Income Trap. I very much applaud her policy prescription to actually give fully subsidized scholarships or vouchers to all children.
I guarantee you, Jennifer, Elizabeth
field.
Warren did not write about COVID in her book, number one.
She 100%
Number two,
wrote about vouchers.
are you suggesting that local communities and local school boards should be deciding whether children should be vaccinated against measles and mumps and other diseases?
Well, actually, this was happening long before. I'll give you an article out of the left-leaning The Atlantic from 2014 that said wealthy suburban counties in L.A. had lower vaccination rates than Sudan. That's not crazy conservatives. They're super wealthy white liberals.
But
There's long been a problem in America.
They're still mandating shots for kids to go into school.
No, Tom, they were. Let me tell you.
Okay, so you're condemning that, Jennifer. You're saying that these children should be vaccinated in the Los Angeles schools. So why shouldn't they be why shouldn't they be masked in the Florida schools?
I think that you have to put the power where it belongs, into the hands of the local community.
We're talking about public health here, Jennifer. We're not talking about, what you're saying is that if I'm sending my kid to school, that my child's health and my health also, we've got breakthrough infections and things, that our health is dependent on some parent who's sitting around watching lying Republican politicians on Fox News tell them there's nothing to worry about and they should be, running around without a mask. I don't see how that leads to any kind of good public health outcome.
I will again point out that there are many progressives as well that have long eschewed vaccines and other things that would be better for public health. This is really not a left or right issue. What I am saying is when it comes to a child's health and all of our health, I wish COVID were the only threat we were facing to our health, but we are not. And so we have to look at it more holistically, and we have to let communities make the best decisions. And there are children who suffer from mental health issues. My children have learning disabilities, and in terms of being able to succeed in school and other issues, it may or may not be good for them to wear a mask. And there might be parents who absolutely want to go to school where everyone wears a mask. And you know what? We can allow for both if we just give parents choice. Again, I very much support Senator Elizabeth Warren's policy prescription.
This is not Elizabeth Warren's proposal. You want to force public school teachers to be exposed to this disease? I know your organization, the Independent Women's Forum, has a long history of, basically hating on teachers' unions. So expose the teachers, expose the kids in the public schools, and hey, if people don't like that, if parents are afraid of that, we'll give you money that you can give to a private, for-profit, school that, just might be kicking some money back to the Republicans. Am I understanding this correctly?
Tim, our frontline healthcare workers have been dealing with COVID up close and personal in a medical environment for the entire year and a half. Can you tell me what percentage of them died and got sick from it? Because I feel like the teachers are trying to act as though they are under
over
a greater
2,000
or
dead
dire
doctors.
threat than our first responders. And I think that's
2,000
wildly
dead doctors.
unfair. The fact is this, that no one is asking teachers not to wear masks. They can mask up, they can double mask up. And the teachers union just said that they and pushed back against the CDC to allow teachers that have disabilities or have people in their lives that could be exposed to COVID that they don't have to go in. So I'm sorry, Tom, teachers are well protected and they have every right to not even go in. This is guidelines from the CDC. So I am at a loss for why you think that we should make children mask up
extraordinarily disingenuous.
That is extraordinarily the truth. You can go on to the
It's extraordinarily disingenuous, Jennifer. Wearing a mask does not offer you 100% or even anything close to it protection if somebody is blowing virus in your face. The main purpose for the mask is to stop the virus coming out of the mouth of the person who's infected, in this case, the child who's infected. We don't want those children infecting the children around them or their teachers. And that's why everybody needs to wear a mask. What you're suggesting is that swimming pools start having a pee in the pool section over, in 1/3 of the pool, and don't pee in the pool section in the 2/3 of the pool. And that's crazy.
So I'm just going to go on the record that Jennifer Stefano does never endorse peeing in pools. Just please don't do it.
Well, this is what you're suggesting, that kids should be blowing viruses all over a classroom. How is that different?
I again go back and say, I think the power should be in the hands of the parents in the local community to best make this decision.
These are public health decisions. These are life and death public health decisions, Jennifer. When these people get COVID, they go to the hospital. They go to the medical professionals and say, please save my life. 600,000 people are dead because of this disease. And you're saying, oh, we should let parents make medical decisions for our entire community, for our schools, for our kids, for everybody? We have never done that.
Sure we have. We have.
Not when it comes to life and death. We vaccinate for polio. We vaccinate for smallpox. When there's deadly diseases out there, we vaccinate. And we require public health measures.
I will tweet it to you, the 2014 headline in The Atlantic. Many liberals and progressives leading up and prior to COVID refused, because Gwyneth Paltrow over at Goop or whomever told them that vaccines are bad, stopped vaccinating their kids. So I would argue that there is plenty of examples of people not doing what is in the best interest of public health. People still smoke. There's a burgeoning industry, and many people are promoting.
And they're not going to go smoking in a classroom.
May or may not. Okay.
They are not going to be smoking in a classroom. And if you can't blow smoke around in a classroom, why should you blow a deadly virus around in a classroom?
Well, I've seen some of the things we teach in American classrooms. I would argue a lot of smoke is being blown in American classrooms these days.
Deflecting is
deflecting. I have repeatedly said if you will honestly say that both, regardless of your political point of view, I think everyone who has an opinion on this, both sides, want to see the health and well-being of our children and each other.
But not our schools.
Okay.
I get it that you're on a Jeremiah here to destroy our public schools, and this will help that. I get that.
Yeah.
But
so again, I think both sides are looking out for the best interest of our children and how to educate them. What I think that we have to do is holistically look at it. There are many public health issues at play aside from COVID. It is not just COVID that threatens us and our health. And I think, the head of the infectious disease for children at Tufts Pediatric came out in the Wall Street Journal and co-authored with a doctor from Johns Hopkins Medical the case against masks for children. Now, that's not to say that alone should dictate public policy, but there is serious scientific debate on this issue. And I think that's
as of Saturday,
fair,
we had
that there are
1,902
humans,
children in the hospitals in the United States with
and
COVID.
I understand that. And what these doctors
And your policies
are
would
arguing
increase
is that
those
masks
numbers.
may not. Well, actually, these doctors argue that the masks may not impact or help that. And what I'm saying is, as parents look at all the factors that do and do not contribute to their individual child's health and the community at large, they should be empowered to make the best decisions.
Okay.
Why can't we trust our people to make the best decisions? That's
because
what
some
we
of
should
them
do.
are idiots, and they and their kids shouldn't expose the rest of us. But I'm sorry, Jennifer. I was going to give you the last word. Jennifer Stefano.
It
thank
is
you.
your show, Tom.
Well,
Thank
yeah,
you.
I suppose, but I do like to be reasonably fair. Jennifer, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
The Commonwealth Foundation. Excuse me. Hang on just a second here.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
CommonwealthFoundation.org is with the one website. She's the Vice President and Chief Strategist, and the Independent Women's Forum, IWF.org. Jennifer Stefano on Twitter. And welcome back. Nancy in Renton, Washington. Hey, Nancy, what's on your mind today?
Good morning, Tom. My question is to you. This is not on what your previous guest was talking about, but my question to you is about the Afghan interpreters, and I'm just wondering what your take is on us getting them out of Afghanistan. And the reason I bring this up is, as a veteran, I'm very upset about what has been happening. And this program has been going on since the 2009 that this special immigrant visa program was started.
Right.
And it was not properly staffed during the Trump administration, and it took a lawsuit to actually get it filled, get the positions filled and staff it properly.
Yeah.
So it's taking a very long time for a lot of these interpreters to get out. So I was just wondering what your take is on that. It takes more than 24 months now for some of these interpreters to prove that they had been working for the U.S. forces over in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So I was wondering what your take on this getting the translators out is.
I'm furious. I'm just absolutely furious, and I'm at the moment furious with the Biden administration. Now, obviously, the Trump administration screwed this up badly and damaged the agency that was, the State Department and this division within the State Department that was supposed to be dealing with this stuff. But Joe Biden has been president since January 20th, and if he was going to plan on pulling people out in August, he should have been ready for it, and he obviously wasn't. And I think that is, a political disaster for him, and hopefully the pressure, the political pressure of that will force this administration and the military to do the right thing. It looks like they're trying to move in that direction. But also, let's not forget, Donald Trump closed 10 American Air Force bases all around Afghanistan. So our ability, as a result of his having just unilaterally closed those bases after he cut a deal with the head of the Taliban that he got out of prison in Pakistan. He got this guy out of jail, and he just declared himself president of Afghanistan yesterday. He gets the guy out of jail. He says, "Don't worry, we're going to leave by May 1st, and everybody out." And I'm shutting down 10 Air Force bases right now as a token of good faith for our basically unilateral withdrawal. And so now our ability to go into regions, beyond Kabul is zero. And I just don't know how you do this. I mean, it looks to me like a complete mess. And if the Taliban is not going to, collaborate in any semblance of good faith, which is not at all a safe bet that they would, but if they can't be bribed or intimidated into cooperating and helping, get some of these folks out, my understanding is that there's 86,000 people who have worked for the United States who are on a database, U.S. military database of people who have, been what the Taliban would view as collaborators with us, and that the Taliban now has that list. And so they're going to be, going house to house looking for these people. We've got to get these people out now. And I don't I don't know how to do it, but I believe it should be done. Did I answer your question, Nancy?
Yes, it does, and I really appreciate you spending the time bringing some light to this.
Yeah.
There's 18,000 of these interpreters and culture guides, and hopefully they can get them out, sir.
Yeah, amen. Thank you, Nancy. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. We have a new video up over at ThomHartmann.com about conspiracy theories. Abby Richards came up with a kind of a hierarchy of conspiracies, maybe a variation on the old Maslow hierarchy. And it goes from actual conspiracies to maybe this was a conspiracy, maybe not, we have questions, to this is kind of crazy stuff, but who knows, flying saucers, for example, to actual science denial, conspiracy theories that actually serve to promote the interests of a particular industry or wealthy individuals, to the totally crazy stuff, the flat earth, the reptilian overlords and all that kind of thing, conspiracy theories that can do tremendous damage. And, one of those being one of the conspiracy theories that, brought two Republicans into Congress this year. So anyhow, I lay the whole thing out with a new video for our supporters over at ThomHartmann.com. 24 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. The other thing I wanted to rant about for a few moments is my op-ed today over at HartmannReport.com, which is titled "The Brutal Endpoint for White Replacement Theory Promoted on Conservative Media." What is that brutal endpoint? An Apartheid America. We've got all the Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham, all these people, well, not all these people, many of these people in right-wing media are out promoting this thing called the Great Replacement Theory, or the White Replacement Theory, or sometimes just replacement theory. It actually started in France, and with a French novel, Camp of the Saints, and a French book called The Great Replacement, and then got translated into English, and basically the theory is that traitors basically race traitors among the white Christian communities in many of these countries, France and the United States specifically, are trying to change the racial makeup of the country in order to, what, gain political power or something like that? And it's all based on this basically racist theory that the color of your skin is a reliable indicator of your intelligence, of your morality, of your decency, of who you are, of your temperament, your trustworthiness, which is a lie, of course. But this is what they're pitching, and they're Tucker Carlson on TV talking about this. For example, saying the Democratic Party is trying to replace the current electorate. The voters now casting ballots with new people, more obedient voters from the third world. And what they're really trying to do is take us back pre-1965, when we had racial quotas on immigration. Most people don't even realize this. Before 1965, there were racial quotas on immigration. People who were not white were prevented from voting legally in state after state across the United States. People who were not white could not buy homes in some neighborhoods. They couldn't get banks to finance them. We had redlining. We had all these things that denied non-white people participation in our government. We taught our children a sanitized version of American history. Our media was like noble cowboys and bloodthirsty Indians. And, happy slaves, remember Gone with the Wind? And, this is where we were at before 1965. In our schools, we were teaching a sanitized version of American history that basically didn't even mention slavery or the Native American genocide. And this is what these guys are trying to take us back to with this white replacement theory. You can read all about it. There's the links and everything over at HartmannReport.com today. We'll be back with your calls after this.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Should we let parents decide if their 10-year-olds are going to come to school and breathe virus all over the other kids and the teachers? Seriously?
Our book today is Jailbreak Out of History by Butch Lee. This is from the first chapter, Jailbreak Out of History, Harriet. Focus on Amazons, about why we deal with real women as myths, girls who never really existed. Yet and again, all are around us, and that we can't bring ourselves to see. Because seeing through white men's eyes is about non-vision of ourselves. So let's deal with a real Amazon. Think about Harriet Tubman. Take 6 months. In fact, take a year and think. Break it on down. What does it mean to be the most famous new African woman in U.S. history? What does it mean to be stuck in that lie? What's the meaning of being famous while being hidden and disfigured and dissed? Let's jailbreak Harriet Tubman out of white history and place her in Amazon and new African, her story, her people's story. Harriet Tubman's life is a live weapon placed in our minds, showing us what it means to be an Amazon, which is why the capitalist patriarchy has forbidden us to touch on it for so long. In this, maybe for the first time, we can see Amazons as a future force in a clash of peoples and nations, not as myths, but as players in the whole difficult course of world politics. We can also appreciate the bittersweet tang of reality as the peeling away of layers of propaganda and disfigurement which have hidden Harriet from us exposes how much we assume and how little we have known. New African women have already pointed out the significant pattern of Harriet's exclusion. Cultural critic Bell Hooks said recently, I mean, if we could recover Ida B. Wells and Harriet Tubman to the extent that we've recovered, say, Zora Neale Hurston, I think that's an important contrast because people want to bury that revolutionary black female history. Historian Deborah Gray White connects Harriet's treatment to a larger pattern in the mainstream history of slavery, in which black women, quote, were reduced to insignificance and largely ignored, end quote. In examining the influential historian Stanley Elkins, she points out, quote, that Elkins seems to omit women altogether was accentuated by his description of slaves whom he identified as part of an American underground, those who never succumbed to Samboism. Among those mentioned were Gabriel, who led the revolt of 1820, Denmark Vesey, leading spirit of the 1822 plot at Charleston, and Nat Turner, an omission conspicuous by its absence, was Harriet Tubman. If Elkins had really been thinking of slaves of both sexes, he would hardly have forgotten this woman, who became widely known as the Moses of her people, end of quote. Patriarchal capitalisms, which only want Amazons to be exotic myths about forgotten ages, have hidden Harriet Tubman in her own fame. They both trivialize and exceptionalize her. These are tools of oppressor culture. The stripped down and censored version of her life is told in elementary schools all over the U.S. empire. So much so that everyone thinks they know her story already, although they don't. Harriet Tubman was born in slavery in Maryland around 1820. She escaped to the North when she was 29, but kept returning secretly to the South again and again to help other slaves escape. For this, she became known as Moses. True statements. But by limiting her, it becomes clever propaganda against her and against her people. Where patriarchy has been unable to deny that women do significant things, it denies the full meaning of what we do by trivializing them. Mary Daly, feminist philosopher, traces the enormity of what patriarchy has done to us. In ancient Greece, the goddess Hecate, also known as Artemis and Diana, was sometimes known as Trivia and represented by a three-faced statue. That was also the name used for the intersection of three paths, which in many old cultures were the sites of mystical power. She writes in Gynecology, quote, in light of the cosmic significance of the term trivia as the crossing of the three roads and of the goddess who bears this name, contemporary meaning of the term in English should be examined. The English term, which according to Merriam-Webster is derived from the Latin trivium or crossroads, is defined as common, ordinary, commonplace, of little worth or importance, insignificant, flimsy, minor, or slight. Of course, according to patriarchal values, that which is commonplace is of little worth. For in a competitive hierarchical society, scarcity is intrinsic to worth. Thus, gold is more important than fresh air, and consequently, we are forced to live in a world in which gold is easier to find than pure air." End quote. So to trivialize Harriet Tubman, the capitalist patriarchy pictures her as an idealized woman by their definition, who makes a life of helping others. Thus, her deeds are squeezed into women's assigned maternal role as nurturer, helper, and rescuer of men, who then go on to do important things. But Harriet wasn't repping Mother Teresa. She wasn't even any kind of civilian at all. She was a combatant, a guerrilla, a warrior carrying pistol and rifle, fighting in her people's long war for freedom, a war that rocked the foundations of African society, American society, and that has never gone away. Think about what it means to be called Moses, which was the code name other new Africans gave her, and which became Harriet's famous warrior name in the anti-slavery underground. When we check out the Bible, we can see that Moses was a ruthless visionary, someone who forced the boldest changes and risks upon his people so that they could survive, who led them out of captivity. To put it simply, Moses was a leader in a time of war. So too was Harriet Tubman. The book Jailbreak Out of History by Butch Lee. Our one-hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. So we've got a new video up about the Senate Leadership Fund and the Congressional Leadership Fund, the SLF and the CLF. Nice, innocent-sounding names, right? Leadership funds and Senate and Congress, but they're Republican super PACs that are taking millions and millions of dollars from fossil fuel and other dirty industries and from right-wing billionaires and recycling that money directly into the campaigns. In fact, in several cases, actually running on the ground, get out the vote efforts for Republican members of Congress, running the entire television operation for some of these members of Congress. Lauren Boebert received over $900,000 from the Congressional Leadership Fund so that she could take the 3rd District of Colorado. It's an amazing story. They spent $437 million just in the last election. This is poisoning this money, poisoning our democracy. It's all over at thomhartmann.com. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. The mask wars, the school wars. By the way, September 20, as I recall, doing that from memory here, I should double check. I printed it out and now I don't know where it is. Here we go. September 20, yes, I was remembering right. Was just announced this morning. That is the date after which, or on and after which, if you have gotten your first vaccine 8 months before that, you are eligible for a booster. So I got my, or your last vaccine, I guess. So I got my final vaccine in March. So April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November. So it looks like I would be eligible in November. We'll see. I mean, maybe you can push it. I don't know. But September 20, so they're going to go for it. That's a good thing, I think. So anyway, let's pick up some of your phone calls here. Marcus in Chicago. Hey, Marcus, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, Tom, as far as this masking children goes, there's a real simple solution to that problem. This is a public health issue. So if you don't want your child to be masked while he's in school, you can do one of 3 things. You can either homeschool him, have him learn remotely, or hire a tutor or a teacher to come into your home and teach your children.
Amen, Marcus. It's not like you don't have choices.
Yeah. You've got 3 choices. Pick one. And if you can't afford either one of those, then you've got to conform to the public view as far as public health.
Yeah, I'm with you.
If you can't do that, then kick rocks.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you, Marcus. Very well said. Renard in Pontiac, Michigan. Hey, Renard, what's on your mind?
Hey,
Tom. How are you today? And thank you for taking my call. The lady Jennifer, whatever her name is, she's a crackpot, and you know, it's just absolutely.
She's actually. Let me just, in defense of Jennifer, she is. Let's see. She has served in numerous roles at Americans for Prosperity. She's a fellow at the Independent Women's Forum. She's the vice president of the Commonwealth Foundation. She's a regular commentator for The Hill. Her work has been published in the New York Times, The Wall Street Journal, and Forbes. And she's a regular on Fox and Friends, Fox Special News Report, and Laura Ingram's show, and on OANN and on MSNBC. So, I don't think she qualifies as a crackpot, Renard. I think what she's reflecting is what is now the mainstream Republican perspective, which is just let the kids die.
Exactly. And isn't that the party of protect the kids? We're the Right to Life party, if I remember.
Oh, well, that's before they're born.
Propaganda.
That's before they're born, Renard. We've got to protect fetuses, but once they're born, hey, to hell with them. No more, no food stamps, no children's health insurance program, no Medicaid, no, housing assistance, no nothing once they're born. But until they're born, they're precious little things.
Exactly. And now they're treating the Republican Party is treating us like the baby that's born. Yeah. And now it's like, well, go fend for yourself. I'm sorry you weren't born with a silver spoon in your mouth. And so you can go ahead and perish. And I look at it like this. These people say that they're parents. Would they let their parents go if they're walking by a pond down south and it says there's alligators and they have the freedom to put their child, And it's just insanity is what it is. It is truly a cult because that's the only thing that makes any sense. Yeah. The people who drank the Kool-Aid when Jim Jones, David Koresh, they burned down their facility. Charles Manson, pick one. These people are no different. They're no different. And if we think that they're going to protect us, they couldn't even protect the kids at Sandy Hook. What makes them think?
Well, and this has been the Republicans' response to Sandy Hook. It was like, oh, well, we can't do anything about that. You just have to let people have guns. And this is their response to COVID. I mean, it's just, it's really tragic. But
it really is.
This is what they're all about. Renard, thank you for the call. Deb in Missoula, Montana. Hey, Deb, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. Hey, I just wanted to comment on Stephanie, your last guest.
Wasn't it
Jennifer? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, Jennifer Stefano.
Yes, that. It's all cool and good if you're the one making the rules, but if you're the one that's on the short end of the stick of the rules, life gets kind of tough. And as an example, in Montana, we have a Republican governor for the first time in over a decade. Our House and our Senate flipped all red, even though we are, we are a red state. We have a good mix historically of left and right, red and blue. Mm-hmm. So now the governor took away the authority of the health departments within each county and city to mandate health requirements such as wearing masks. And he will not put in a mask mandate. Everything's recommended. And so for those people that are in those, super red counties, you have no choice. You're at the mercy of the it's all about me versus the it's all about we people.
Right. I just don't understand, Deb, why this is the hill they want to die on.
Exactly.
It's like, I get it that Donald Trump was afraid that if the economy slowed down in 2020 that he might not win re-election. And that was a legitimate fear. And he wanted to keep people, engaged in the economy, shopping and going to work. And so he diminished or played down, as he told Bob Woodward, played down the danger of the virus, because he wanted to get reelected. But he's no longer in office.
Right. Well, and I think that we all have our own personal agendas, and as human beings, we are always going to, that's going to be at the forefront. But as a community, we have a social contract, and we've always abided by that social contract, and we've come so far, it's not a feudal system in the United States anymore. But it seems like things like this that are no-brainers, that we are slowly inching back, and this, my rights outweigh your safety.
I think you just hit the core of the issue, Deb, and that is that the idea of a social contract is anathema to the billionaires who own the Republican Party. They want to live above all the rest of us. The billionaires who fund groups like, like Jennifer's group, for that matter. They want to live above us. They want to live in an oligarchy. They want to have a completely separate set of rules for themselves. They have now their own tax laws, so they only pay 1% to 3% income taxes, effectively, as we learned to our horror this year. They're never prosecuted for crimes. You got Rick Scott in the United States Senate after the company that he was the CEO of engaged in the largest Medicare fraud in the history of the United States, over $1 billion. He walked away with a giant paycheck from that company. They've got, one rule, and many of them, like Ted Cruz, for example, he's sending his two kids to a private school, a $30,000 a year private school that absolutely mandates masks. Of course, he wants his kids protected, but, public schools, no. Public schools, it should be a problem. Those teachers, those pesky unionized teachers, we can't have that. I really think it's what you said, this whole issue of a social contract. They do not want there to be a social contract because that social contract eventually is going to expand, as it did before, to suggest that billionaires should be paying taxes like the rest of us, and the companies should be regulated so that they don't poison the environment and screw their workers.
Yeah, I think also a large part of the foundation of that, veering away from the social contract is the organized religious, the right-wing religion. It's an institution of exclusion. If you're with me, follow my rules, and we'll take care of you. If you're not, you're excluded, and you're seen as a threat. And so I think that they think of so much of just themselves or what they see and believe, which is white Christianity and ultra wealth, because that, as you mentioned, it ensures their staying on top. So it's so sad. And I agree, the three options, and if not, take a rock.
Yeah, there you go. Love it. Deb, thank you. It really is. Our society is being poisoned by big money. It just is being poisoned. And now with the virus, too. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with your calls in just a moment. 1,902 children in the hospital across the United States as of last Saturday. And welcome back. And let's see here. Andrea in Las Vegas, Nevada, watching us on YouTube. Hey, Andrea, what's on your mind today?
Hey, how's everybody doing? So, just real quick, I said, don't forget, you can be a crackpot and have credentials. I mean, look at the former guy. Okay, so to my point, in Texas is Section 38.031. It's a notice of lice. They have to notify the school nurse.
You're talking lice, like crabs. You're talking the little parasites that attach themselves to your hair.
Yes, it's the Board of Trustees of the Independent School District has to notify. It's a policy requiring the school nurse to notify the public elementary schools if a child has lice.
Right.
And that's not deadly like COVID. So I'm not sure where they're getting that confused, but I think maybe you guys should really bring that to the table. Like, okay, well, what's up with this Section 38.031? Why can't we have a section for COVID? If there's a section for lice, that's not deadly.
So in other words, if a kid shows up in school and the teacher determines that the kid has lice, the teacher is required to notify the parents of all the children who have been exposed to lice by that child. But if a kid shows up at school with the symptoms of COVID or even tests positive for COVID in Texas, the teacher doesn't have to notify the parents that their children have been exposed, or is required not to? I don't know which it is.
It's usually the nurse. The nurse has to get involved. They have to be notified immediately.
For lice?
If the child has lice.
Well, what about for COVID?
Certain schools, I know Houston is a very blue city. I think they're pretty on that, but other school districts are not.
Right.
So,
this is just, it's like the whole thing is just nuts. I mean,
it's a bizarre, Twilight Zone again. Yeah, for sure.
It really and truly is. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for the call. Ed in Belfair, Washington. Hey, Ed, what's up?
Good morning, Tom. This is Miss Stefano. I don't want any money going to private schools as a taxpayer. They watched the $3.5 trillion being passed the other day, and all the amendments that the Republicans were putting up about money going here, money going there. I was surprised an amendment wasn't put up that no taxpayer monies was supposed to go to private schools. I just don't agree with that.
Yeah. Well, I think that this whole effort, I don't think it's a good faith effort, frankly. I think this whole effort to make our public schools dangerous places to send your children is part of a larger multi-decade campaign that has been launched by white people starting after the Brown versus Board of Education decision. Churches that came along in the late 50s and early 60s offering private whites-only education. This whole private school movement that grew out of that, and now it's become an industry, and you've got a whole bunch of people who are getting very wealthy running private schools, and they want to destroy our public schools. And then you've also got the anti-union partisans. There's still a couple of large unions left in the United States. You got the Postal Workers Union, and you got the two teachers unions, the NEA and the other one that Randy Weingarten is the head of. I forget the acronym. But in any case, they want to destroy these unions. They want to destroy our public schools. They want to turn everything into some kind of for-profit something or other. So, what? Oh, the American Federation of Teachers is Randy. Ed, thank you for the call. I'm really concluding that that's the bottom. That really is the bottom line for many of these folks who are saying, "Oh, school choice. We have to let children choose whether or not to wear masks, or let their parents choose for them." Really? We'll be right back. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. So Rand Paul is now echoing Louis Gohmert. Remember Louis Gohmert back in the day, back in the after 9/11, when he was talking about terror babies. There's Muslims coming to the United States to have babies who will be citizens, and we can't kick them out anymore, and then they're going to grow up and they're going to be terrorists. Yeah, and we all kind of laughed at Louis Gohmert. So now Rand Paul is talking about how the Biden administration is taking kids from down at the border who may have it, COVID, and they're plucking them up and putting them all over the United States as if they're wishing to seed the country with a new variant. Right. But that's not half of it. Then he goes on to say that, for him, quote, "The bottom line for those who are saying I won't go to a restaurant unless everybody's vaccinated," he says, "mind your own business." Well, Rand, it is our business. Public health is all of our businesses. I've got a whole new rant about Rand Paul's bizarre take on the public good over at thomhartmann.com. It's a video. You can check it out there. 51 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you and Tim in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Hey, Tim, what's on your mind?
Yes, your guest, Stefano, he mentioned that there was an article in the Wall Street Journal authored by a doctor from Tufts and a doctor from Johns Hopkins. And that sounded pretty persuasive, so I looked it up. And I found that one of the doctors is named Marty Macri, and he wrote an opinion piece that was published in the Wall Street Journal on February 18th, 2021. The headline is, "We'll have herd immunity by April."
Okay.
If somebody wrote that, how can they have any credibility going forward.
Well, and how can you quote an article with that title as an authoritative source of information?
The guy is an oncologist, and he argues in this piece that because COVID has dropped so low in January, it can't possibly be due to people changing their behavior. It can only be a sign that we're nearing herd immunity.
Yeah.
This guy is an idiot.
Yeah, at the very, very least. Thank you very much for that, Tim. Thank you, and thank you for doing the research on that. Guests pull these things out, when we're on the air, and I just can't be Googling it at the same time I'm trying to debate somebody. Thank you. I appreciate the contribution to the flow of facts on our program. Brad in Prattville, Alabama. Hey, Brad, what's on your mind today?
So I just kind of wanted to give you some info what's going on down here. We are currently out of ICU beds. We have 41 pediatric cases in ICU, and the governor luckily just lifted the requirement that one nurse can now treat 2 ICU patients at the same time. But instead of allowing businesses to mandate vaccines and mandate masks, we're just going to double work our nurses and doctors that are already overworked because, we're still on the honor system when it comes to doing the right thing here.
This is your Governor Kay Ivey, isn't that?
That is correct. Yeah.
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 So she's still not allowing mask mandates?
She will not allow mask mandates or
didn't she apologize for that?
Mandate. That was Asa Hutchinson.
Oh, okay.
From Arkansas.
Oh, okay.
Kay Ivey, now I will say this, from the beginning, she has said everybody needs to mask up, everybody needs to get the vaccine as soon as you're available. She was one of the first GOP governors to get the vaccine. Right. So she has said the right thing, she's just not doing the right thing. And I'll be honest with you, Tom, I really feel like she is absolutely scared to go back and do it. We did have a mask mandate for about 4 months last year, starting in March, and I think it expired at the end of July. But she was getting a lot of threats because of it.
Yeah, they're afraid of the bullies.
I think yeah, exactly.
This is the amazing thing. You see these school board meetings and you see these people shouting and screaming and stuff. And then, and then somebody takes the video of that and does, facial recognition software and discovers that none of those people are parents. They're like,
been in school for 2 weeks. We've been back in school for 2 weeks now, and both of my kids have gotten letters home saying somebody in their classroom tested positive. But our whole family is fully vaxxed. Both of my kids are over 12, and they got their second shot right before they went back to school. So, hopefully that's good enough.
Yeah.
Because nobody else is going to do the right thing.
Well, I wish you the very best, Brad. Brad, thank you for the call, and thanks for the update on Alabama. Thomas in Mossy Head, Florida. Hey, Thomas, what's up?
Hey, Tom. My oldest daughter is a 5th grade teacher, and she was mandating or making the kids wear a mask. Apparently, some of the kids went home and told their parents, and the head of the school board set my daughter down, and not directly, but almost like a lawyer, insinuated that if she does that again, she's going to lose her job. In the meantime, her husband, my son-in-law, who's never had a sick day in his life, has COVID-19 to the point they just put him on a respirator.
Oh, my God. Was he vaccinated?
No, he wouldn't. I mean, he's a Trump fan big time. Of course, my daughter, she's smart. Yeah, well, I've got another comment, too. And if you have anything else.
For it, Thomas.
Yeah, I think, a lot of these bridges, you'll see they're dedicated to, somebody, whatever, either an ex-politician or somebody. But anyway, there's a small bridge down here on the panhandle of Florida that we're going to go ahead, me and a buddy of mine who has a print shop, we're going to make up the most official-looking dedication sign to the governor. The name of the creek is Dismal Creek. I don't know how long. I don't know how long it was.
The Dismal Creek dedicated to Ron DeSantis?
Yeah. I don't know how long it'll last. I don't think, we're going to make it as official as we can looking.
Yeah.
And, it might stay up there for a long time, and I doubt if the I'm surrounded by Trumpers.
Yeah.
If they'll catch on to it or whatever.
In memory of all the people who died for Ron DeSantis' political career, thank you all.
Dismal Creek.
Yeah, Dismal Creek. Amazing. Thomas, thanks for the call. It's great to hear from you. Thanks for listening to us down there in Mossy Head, Florida. We're gonna continue the day. Just on the other side of this break, the executive director of the Global Institute for Water Security at the University of Saskatchewan. The Colorado River is running out of water. We're going to talk about that, and then I'll be getting back to your calls.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at hellofresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com. Annie's Kit Clubs, creativity delivered right to your door. More info at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. Wild Alaskan Company, delicious, sustainably sourced seafood delivered right to your door. More information at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. And Mack Weldon, reinventing men's basics. More info at mackweldon.com/Tom.
We say fight back!
Guns for Hire, how the CIA and U.S. Army recruit mercenaries for white Rhodesia. It's a historical reprint of what appears to be a 1979 pamphlet, basically. This is from the introduction. It does have an ISBN number. It is available in book sources. In Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, actually this must have been published post-1980 because they're referencing Zimbabwe. In Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, 270,000 white settlers, mostly immigrated since World War II, controlled the government and economy, ruling over the 7 million black Africans. The Zimbabweans cannot vote. They have been forced off the bulk of the arable land, and they have no democratic rights whatsoever. All labor performance in Zimbabwe is black labor, and it is intensely exploited, often at less than subsistence wages. Zimbabweans have been fighting European invaders since the early 17th century. Since the 1890s, they have been directly ruled by Europeans, at first in the form of a private British corporation, the British South Africa Company. Since 1923, direct political rule has been in the hands of the white settlers, currently led by Ian Smith and his fascist Rhodesian Front Party. It's important to note that the white settlers were originally given this direct local power as a, quote, self-governing colony of the British government, thereby creating a master-caretaker relationship. During these past 80-odd years, Western imperialism, the multinational corporations of the United States, Britain, and South Africa, has extracted huge profits from the exploited and oppressed Zimbabwean population via the subsidiaries of the Anglo-Americans, Lonrho, Amex, AMAX, Union Carbide, Mobil, ITT, and other corporations. They fully intend to continue doing so as long as they can. The white settler minority has been rewarded for their violent subjugation of the Zimbabwean people with perhaps the highest national standard of living in the world. Sir Roy Walensky, the former Prime Minister of the Central African Federation, which included what is now Rhodesia, once said, "This man Smith has an appeal. It's the appeal of an easy life.
For $6,000 a year, you can have 5 servants, a swimming pool, and a lot. Beginning during the early 1960s, however, the Zimbabwean nationalist forces under the leadership of the Zimbabwe African National Union, ZANU, evolved the strategy of guerrilla war to liberate their people and land. It is proving to be very successful. There are 20,000 guerrillas in base camps in Tanzania and Mozambique, over 3,000 in Zimbabwe itself, and this number is continually rising. In a meeting between Stephen Solars, a U.S. congressman, and the ZANU guerrilla leaders, they were reported to reject the possibility of enlisting the assistance of Cuban or other foreign troops, declaring that if we cannot liberate ourselves, we do not deserve to be liberated. Despite Western propaganda to the effect that the U.S. and British only wish to avoid a bloodshed in Rhodesia, don't forget the Zimbabweans have been bleeding for almost a century, their real fear is that the liberation struggle will win. With this victory in sight, it is not surprising that the counterattack by the Smith regime has become more vicious and brutal. Actually, this must have been published pre-1980, because this is when Smith was still in power in Rhodesia. More than 250,000 rural Zimbabweans have been forced into concentration camps. Terrorist raids have been conducted against Zimbabwean refugees in Mozambique. Dusk to dawn shoot-on-sight curfews have been instituted and enforced in the border areas. And escalating counterinsurgency attacks have been launched against the military arm of the liberation struggle, the Zimbabwean People's Army, ZIPA. It is crucial for Westerners to understand that the Smith regime has not stood alone in this barbaric campaign. This pamphlet documents the critically important element in U.S. imperialism's support for the Smith regime, white mercenary reinforcements for the fascist Rhodesian, quote, security forces. This flow of U.S. mercenaries to prop up white Rhodesia is an important, though secret, part of U.S. imperialism's strategy for Africa. The U.S. has massive investments in southern Africa. Zimbabwe alone supplies the bulk of high-grade chrome ore used in the U.S. for jet engines and other advanced technological items. Coal, copper, and other minerals are ripped out of Zimbabwe for U.S. industry. Mobil Oil, Texaco, Hertz Rent-A-Cars, Holiday Inns, and many other U.S. corporations operate illegally in Rhodesia through foreign subsidiaries. More important still is South Africa, the fortress of U.S. interests in Africa, where $1.5 billion is invested by GM, IBM, Ford, and other giant multinational corporations. The liberation of Zimbabwe would, for the first time, penetrate the buffer zone of satellite countries protecting the borders of South Africa. South African guerrilla fighters, who are already training by the thousands in camps in Tanzania and Zambia, would have direct access to re-enter their land and accelerate the liberation struggle. Knowing that the stakes are high, U.S. imperialism has worked to strengthen the white supremacist outposts in Africa, although at times this had to be done covertly. In 1970, the Nixon White House approved Henry Kissinger's Operation Tar Baby strategy, based on Option 2 of the Secret National Security Study Memorandum No. 39. This strategy essentially called for covert military assistance, including direct exchanges, so that South African troops could be trained in the U.S. in specialized tactics and weapons. This would be done while the U.S. tried to convince Africans that it was on their side. This is from the pamphlet number 39, that Kissinger memorandum. We would maintain public opposition to racial oppression, but relax political isolation and economic restrictions without openly taking a position undermining the United Kingdom and the UN on Rhodesia. We would be more flexible in our attitudes toward the Smith regime. And it goes on from there. Guns for hire.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. A lot going on in the world today, and a very special crazy alert for you. This QAnon influencer known as the Queen, seriously, I'm not making this up, is inspiring a wave of harassment, Travis Geddes writes over at drawstory.com, against healthcare providers. Romana Didulo is, according to this new conspiracy theory out there, is the secret Queen of Canada. That Queen Elizabeth II was executed for crimes against humanity, and that this Romana Didulo woman is now the actual Queen of Canada and of England, apparently. And she is asking her followers to send form letters to U.S. health clinics and Walmarts accusing them of war crimes related to COVID-19 mitigation. It doesn't get weirder than that. Anyhow, our crazy alert for the day. That said, on the line with us right now is Jay Famiglietti. Jay is the executive director and professor at the Global Institute for Water Security at the University of Saskatchewan. Famiglietti.com, jayfamiglietti.com is the website. It's spelled JayFamiglietti.com, and Jay Famiglietti spelled the same way as his Twitter handle as well. Dr. Famiglietti, welcome back to the program. It's been a while since we've talked. I saw this story about how the Colorado River is now running out of water, basically, in the American West. And it's, they're starting to have to take farms offline and things. Where are we at with regard to this water crisis?
We're in a pretty bad place, Tom, and it's great to be back on the show. Thanks for having me. This is a colossal drought. It could go down as the worst drought in history because of its spatial extent. It covers all of Western North America because the temperatures are so hot. And, the water management part becomes very, very tricky under these conditions. We're set up for, our management is set up for much wetter times. Things are getting much drier. And to complicate matters, we're not doing a great job managing the groundwater, which is our buffer against these droughts, and we're burning through it really quickly. So overall, we're in tough shape.
So how tough? What are the metrics that you're looking at that tell you that this is a crisis, and what do they tell us for the next, few years or longer? I mean, where do we start hitting, mileposts where we know that we've gone way too far?
Well, so there's a couple of things. One thing that we look at carefully is the level of water in Lake Mead, and that's at 1067 feet above sea level right now, and it's headed for 1,066. And so that's a critical threshold. If that continues to drop, we'll move into more stringent conservation measures. The other thing that we look at is a couple of other things, especially in the West. How wet the winters were, the snowpack is really important for surface water availability, the water in our rivers and our streams and our reservoirs. It was a really terrible winter, especially in California. I've been looking at some of our satellite data. In the 20 years that I've been looking at our satellite data, this is the worst winter, the driest winter in the last 20 years in the satellite record that I've been looking at. And the third thing is the groundwater levels. Again, the groundwater is that water that's underground. We pump it out. It's our buffer against drought, and it really supplements a lot of our water supplies around the West. And we are headed towards the lowest point ever. Let's put it that way. In a few more months, or maybe this time next year, we'll be at a lowest point ever.
What do we do about this? We're not changing the weather any day soon, and it looks like this is the new normal. Is it enough for cities just to recycle their wastewater, like I know some California cities are doing right now? Is it enough for us to figure out ways to do agriculture, to farm that are less water intensive? Are those things? And are we? And I know that at least one hydro dam has been shut down out west here, because there just wasn't enough water, a dam producing electricity. What do we do about that too? Everybody put solar panels on their roofs. I mean, are there solutions here that can be dealt with, within the time frame of this going from crisis to disaster?
I think that's the key, Tom, is the speed with which we respond. The IPCC report came out last week, showing that things aren't getting any better. Climate's getting hotter. Water supply is decreasing around the world. I just drove across Western North America. I drove down from Saskatoon. I'm in San Luis Obispo right now. It was like driving through the apocalypse. I mean, it was literally scorched earth. So we are at a point where we really have to adapt. We have to So all the things that you said are important. So with respect to water, we have to keep conserving in our cities. I think the big efficiencies, the big savings will come from agriculture. That's where we use 80% of our water. And so there's a lot of efficiencies that can be realized there. That's going to require new policy across the West, maybe acceleration of some policy that's already in place here in California, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. But everything else that you said is true. I mean, we have to, anything that we can do to save energy saves water. Anything that we can do to save water saves energy. We have to be looking at, one thing to keep in mind is that water and energy and food are all intimately linked. So any of the savings that we realize in any of those three things individually affects the others. So, thinking about how we can grow food more efficiently using less water will also, save energy. Thinking about how we can save energy, we'll end up saving water and probably end up having some impacts on food security as well.
Are you seeing the Western American states collaborating on this, or are we going to have water wars?
I think we have. So that's a two-part answer. And the first part is we're already collaborating on things like in big river basins. So we collaborate in the Colorado River Basin, and we've got the drought contingency plan, and that works well. We've got collaborations going on in the Pacific Northwest, and so and even into Canada. So all that's going well. The problem, I think, is more on the groundwater side. Groundwater is handled state by state, yet some of these big groundwater systems, and it's not just the Western U.S., but it's around the world. They either span state boundaries or international boundaries. That's where the collaborations need to come into play. Another thing we need to think about is if you look at the West and you look at California, California is trying to produce food for like all of North America, but only using California's water. So that's something that needs to be worked out. Either agriculture is going to have to move, or we're going to have to move more water to California. It's a national scale, if not an international scale problem.
Yeah. Wow. Amazing stuff. Dr. Jay Famiglietti, the Executive Director and Professor at the Global Institute for Water Security at the University of Saskatchewan, jfamiglietti.com, Famiglietti, and Twitter, at Jay Famiglietti. Dr. Famiglietti, thanks a lot for dropping by. It's always great talking with you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. I really hope we can get this under control. I'll be back with more of the news of the day, and I'm going to pick up your calls here on the other side of this break. Stick around.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So, mask, don't mask, is the Republican Party, well, I'll tell you that right after these games they're playing right now. And welcome back. Mike in Topeka, Kansas. Hey, Mike, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I was just calling I was a little confused about what the big thing is as far as having it being mandated for people to be vaccinated, because when I was growing up, I mean, you had to be vaccinated. Mm-hmm. That was just the way it was.
Yeah.
You know,
I remember when they did the polio vaccine. In fact, I remember two different polio vaccines. One of them may be a false memory from watching newsreels or something. I mean, this was when I was literally a little kid, but I remember getting a sugar cube in school, and I remember getting a shot a couple of years later, if I'm remembering correctly. I might have the order reversed. And I don't remember any anti-polio vaccine campaigns. There were not people standing out in front of the school with signs. They were not yelling at the school board. My teacher wasn't quaking in her boots. Everybody just lined up and got the polio vaccine. And guess what? We got rid of polio.
Yep.
I mean, around the world. But what we didn't have in whatever year that was, 1957, I think, or 50, somewhere there in the mid-50s, what we didn't have is we didn't have social media populated by right-wing trolls and trolls from foreign countries who were trying to screw up America. And we didn't have a Republican Party at that time that thought that its best chance to win elections was to destroy America and have us blame it on Democrats. So therefore, when a Democrat gets power, you do everything you can to screw up America. And that's what we have right now. We've got Republicans that are trying to engage in intentional sabotage of our country, of our health, because they think that this is going to help them in the 2022 and 2024 elections.
You know what? I live in Kansas. It's like Kansas is like the mecca of conservatism. I'll tell you, in the Republican Party, it's a mess here. Well, I shouldn't say that because I got a lot of friends that are Republican, but I just don't understand why it's such a big deal about the vaccinations, and I'll get off here because I'm sure you have other people waiting to call in. So, but that was just I just don't understand. To me, it makes no sense.
Yeah, it doesn't
whatsoever.
to me either, Mike. And have you discussed this with any of your Republican friends?
Oh God, yes.
What do they say? Are they vaccinated?
Most of them are not. I won't say all of them.
Yeah.
But most of them are not vaccinated.
And what's their reason?
They don't really give you a reason.
Huh. I saw it on Tucker.
Like,
is that the deal?
I think a lot of them think that a lot of them have a fear that there's something in the vaccine, I think, or that the vaccine may have adverse side effects.
Yeah. It's very unfortunate, Mike. It's very unfortunate. Mike, I do have to go now. Thank you very much for the call, and thanks for watching us there in Topeka on Free Speech TV. I truly appreciate it. We'll be right back as soon as I read an ad on the other side. I'll be right back with you in 1 minute. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. We have a new video over at ThomHartmann.com for the folks who support our program, and it's this one's a geeky science one. And it's about this little snippet of genetic material, what's called microRNA. And the name of this one is called MIR1, M-I-R-1. And we've known for years that when muscles are used, I'm talking about exercise to the point where you feel fatigue in your muscles, that when when muscles are exercised, it depletes them of MIR1. What they didn't know is where that MIR1 goes and what it does. And it turns out that our fat cells draw the MIR1 in from the muscles, and it causes the fat cells to start converting themselves into fatty acids that can be used to feed the muscles. So we're not just building muscle, but we're also reducing fat in our body. It's absolutely fascinating. I'm going into depth on it in this new video. It's over at ThomHartmann.com. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you and Michelle in Van Nuys, California. Hey, Michelle, what's on your mind today?
I wanted to reply to your earlier guest, Ms. Stefano. Mm-hmm. A couple of things that she said. The first thing is she kept referring to an Atlantic article, which I did not read, but she kept saying the headline of the article. So she never stated what was actually in the article. And you know that headlines often are gotchas trying to get people to read
clickbait,
them.
Yeah.
Yes, so we don't know what the actual article stated regarding the population here of anti-vax people. The second thing is California and Los Angeles City School, LAUSD, have rules regarding vaccinations. And I just double-checked the LAUSD website, and they require all the standard vaccinations in order to go to school there. You know, COVID, again, is transitional. But California is also gradually instituting COVID vaccine requirements, and they're requiring teachers to have vaccines to go back into the school system. My cousin's a teacher in Northern California. And so there's not this, you know, we have our share of Trumpers and all that, but it's not like it's a majority of people here in the Los Angeles area. And any of those wealthy people that she's quoting from are either A, going to private school and getting some kind of waiver from the private school, because the public schools are not going to give them that waiver that easily, or they're going and being homeschooled, and the wealthy people can afford that.
Right. Right. And also we don't know the numbers. I mean, if 99% of all kids or all people are normally vaccinated and 98% in Los Angeles, then Los Angeles is lower than the norm. I mean, you know, it's Abe Lincoln say figures don't lie, but liars can figure. Not to say that Jennifer is a liar necessarily, because
I just thought she was being disingenuous.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, especially when she kept saying the headline of the article, because she's trying to say this is a liberal publication and this is the headline. She never said that was the gist of the article.
Yeah, and that I should have caught that. Michelle, thank you. Yeah. Thank you for that. I appreciate the call. Kent in Hempstead, North Carolina. Hey, Kent, what's on your mind today?
Well, I've got a kind of a quick two-part question. Since to my knowledge, that was an international effort in Afghanistan, unless I'm mistaken.
No, Bush pulled together a coalition. It was a lot harder with Iraq. Remember Freedom Fries?
Right.
But he pulled together a coalition on Afghanistan.
Well, my question is this. Why is Joe Biden the only one I see standing in front of a microphone answering the tough questions about the situation right now? Where is Merkel and Boris Johnson and Macron and the other? I know that wasn't a NATO operation, but it was our NATO partners primarily that were involved with that. And the only one I see on the news answering the tough questions about the withdrawal, et cetera, is Joe Biden. Yeah. And is it because he's the only one with the courage to do that? Or am I missing something international?
This is something that I can't speak to with absolute authority, because I'm not certain that what I'm about to tell you is actually the way it is. And
I'll take an educated guess.
Yeah, but exactly. That's all this is an educated guess. When Trump signed the treaty with the Taliban back in 2019, and when he cut that deal, when he ordered Pakistan to release the Taliban leader, he released 5,000 of the top Taliban fighters, many of whom are now back in showing up on TV. And the leader that he ordered released made his triumphant return yesterday to Kabul, and he's now the president of Afghanistan. When he did that over the objection of a number of other countries. He did that over the objection of the government of Afghanistan itself, the Ghani government, the guy who fled the country. And by doing that, he was basically saying to all 350,000 people in the Afghan army, America will not have your back after May 1st, 2021. And so just, get ready. And that's what they did, is they got ready. And I'm guessing that around that time, our international allies also said, okay, that's it, we're out of here. Like I said, I'm not an authority on that. But
I was just curious, where did he derive the authority to speak on behalf of the international partners that were involved in that whole mess? And I call it a mess. George Bush released a statement, but he didn't say the buck started here and Joe Biden says that it stops here. Yeah. He just sort of said something like, well, this is a tragedy of unbelievable proportion or some crap like that. But the buck started with him and Cheney.
Right, which everybody forgets.
He pulled the rug out from Afghanistan when they started the war in Iraq and diverted all that men and women and material to a ding-dong war. And took the focus off of Afghanistan, and I could see, I've seen some Congress people that served over there, and they said that everybody knew by about 2002, 2003 or 4 that was a lost cause because we were stuck in Iraq, and we did actually do what we set out to do.
Sean just told me that Britain and France left Afghanistan in 2014, and last June, this year, June of 2021 was when, which country? Germany left. So apparently, the cheese stands alone here. Apparently
we had a moron speaking internationally for us.
Yeah, we did for 4 years. We absolutely did. Kent, thank you for the call, and thanks for watching us there in Hempstead, North Carolina. Back with more of your calls and the news of the day. And, I got to tell you about this. Republicans pretending there's a cure for COVID right after this. Stick around.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
This is about as egregious as it gets. By the way, France and England left Afghanistan after bin Laden was captured and killed. Guns for Hire, how the CIA and U.S. Army recruit mercenaries for white Rhodesia. It's a historical reprint of what appears to be a 1979 pamphlet, basically. This is from the introduction. It does have an ISBN number. It is available in book sources. In Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, actually this must have been published post-1980 because they're referencing Zimbabwe. In Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, 270,000 white settlers, mostly immigrated since World War II, controlled the government and economy, ruling over the 7 million black Africans. The Zimbabweans cannot vote. They have been forced off the bulk of the arable land, and they have no democratic rights whatsoever. All labor performance in Zimbabwe is black labor, and it is intensely exploited, often at less than subsistence wages. Zimbabweans have been fighting European invaders since the early 17th century. Since the 1890s, they have been directly ruled by Europeans, at first in the form of a private British corporation, the British South Africa Company. Since 1923, direct political rule has been in the hands of the white settlers, currently led by Ian Smith and his fascist Rhodesian Front Party. It's important to note that the white settlers were originally given this direct local power as a, quote, self-governing colony of the British government, thereby creating a master-caretaker relationship. During these past 80-odd years, Western imperialism, the multinational corporations of the United States, Britain, and South Africa, has extracted huge profits from the exploited and oppressed Zimbabwean population via the subsidiaries of the Anglo-Americans, Lonrho, Amex, AMAX, Union Carbide, Mobil, ITT, and other corporations. They fully intend to continue doing so as long as they can. The white settler minority has been rewarded for their violent subjugation of the Zimbabwean people with perhaps the highest national standard of living in the world. Sir Roy Welensky, the former Prime Minister of the Central African Federation, which included what is now Rhodesia, once said, "This man Smith has an appeal. It's the appeal of an easy life. For $6,000 a year, you can have 5 servants, a swimming pool, and a lot." Beginning during the early 1960s, however, the Zimbabwean nationalist forces under the leadership of the Zimbabwe African National Union, ZANU, evolved the strategy of guerrilla war to liberate their people and land. It is proving to be very successful. There are 20,000 guerrillas in base camps in Tanzania and Mozambique, over 3,000 in Zimbabwe itself, and this number is continually rising. In a meeting between Stephen Solars, a U.S. congressman, and the ZANU guerrilla leaders, they were reported to reject the possibility of enlisting the assistance of Cuban or other foreign troops, declaring that if we cannot liberate ourselves, we do not deserve to be liberated. Despite Western propaganda to the effect that the U.S. and British only wish to avoid a bloodshed in Rhodesia, don't forget the Zimbabweans have been bleeding for almost a century, their real fear is that the liberation struggle will win. With this victory in sight, it is not surprising that the counterattack by the Smith regime has become more vicious and brutal. Actually, this must have been published pre-1980 because this is when Smith was still in power in Rhodesia. More than 250,000 rural Zimbabweans have been forced into concentration camps. Terrorist raids have been conducted against Zimbabwean refugees in Mozambique. Dusk to dawn shoot-on-sight curfews have been instituted and enforced in the border areas.
and escalating counterinsurgency attacks have been launched against the military arm of the liberation struggle, the Zimbabwean People's Army, ZIPA. It is crucial for Westerners to understand that the Smith regime has not stood alone in this barbaric campaign. This pamphlet documents the critically important element in U.S. imperialism's support for the Smith regime, white mercenary reinforcements for the fascist Rhodesian, quote, security forces. This flow of U.S. mercenaries to prop up white Rhodesia is an important, though secret, part of U.S. imperialism's strategy for Africa. The U.S. has massive investments in southern Africa. Zimbabwe alone supplies the bulk of high-grade chrome ore used in the U.S. for jet engines and other advanced technological items. Coal, copper, and other minerals are ripped out of Zimbabwe for U.S. industry. Mobil Oil, Texaco, Hertz Rent-A-Cars, Holiday Inns, and many other U.S. corporations operate illegally in Rhodesia through foreign subsidiaries. More important still is South Africa, the fortress of U.S. interests in Africa, where $1.5 billion is invested by GM, IBM, Ford, and other giant multinational corporations. The liberation of Zimbabwe would, for the first time, penetrate the buffer zone of satellite countries protecting the borders of South Africa. South African guerrilla fighters, who are already training by the thousands in camps in Tanzania and Zambia, would have direct access to re-enter their land and accelerate the liberation struggle. Knowing that the stakes are high, U.S. imperialism has worked to strengthen the white supremacist outposts in Africa, although at times this had to be done covertly. In 1970, the Nixon White House approved Henry Kissinger's Operation Tar Baby strategy, based on Option 2 of the Secret National Security Study Memorandum Number 39. This strategy essentially called for covert military assistance, including direct exchanges, so that South African troops could be trained in the U.S. in specialized tactics and weapons. This would be done while the U.S. tried to convince Africans that it was on their side. This is from the pamphlet number 39, that Kissinger memorandum. We would maintain public opposition to racial oppression, but relax political isolation and economic restrictions without openly taking a position undermining the United Kingdom and the UN on Rhodesia. We would be more flexible in our attitudes toward the Smith regime. And it goes on from there. Guns for hire.
Share the Thom Hartmann program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann program. Just a reminder that my daily rants are published every day over at hartmanreport.com, and our podcast, our 1-hour podcast of the show, which is entirely free, is available through, iTunes and all the normal places where you find podcasts, cut down of our show. And that we post a weekly video over at thomhartmann.com. And the one this week is about seditious conspiracy, U.S. Code 2384. And the argument I'm making is that this law, which imposes 20 years in prison to by force, prevent, hinder, or delay the execution of any law of the United States, end quote, is something that we should be seriously considering dusting off and applying to not just the people who showed up on January 6th, but the people who sent them there. Check it out, thomhartmann.com. And welcome back. Okay, I mentioned this this Republican scam, and this is this idea that we have a cure. We have a cure for COVID, so you don't have to get vaccinated and you don't have to worry because we've got this cure. Greg Abbott is getting it in Texas. It's the Regeneron. It's the monoclonal antibodies. Aren't they wonderful? And this is like all over right-wing media right now, that there's a cure. The fact of the matter is that this was a study that was done in the UK in June of this year. And what they found was that when they used Regeneron, this is the monoclonal antibody. This is what Donald Trump and Chris Christie and Rudy Giuliani all got when they caught COVID. It takes an hour. They drip it into your veins. You have to sit in an infusion center. The study in the UK found that when people got this, it reduced deaths, mortality, by 20%, which is good, but it's not a cure. Not even close. And thank you, Joyce. And right now, basically, the Republicans are hiding behind Regeneron, this monoclonal antibody, the same way they were with hydroxychloroquine before. They were like, oh, don't worry, just go out and get sick. Send your kids to school without masks. It's no big deal because, we've got hydroxychloroquine. Well, now it's because we've got Regeneron. Texas has 9 infusion centers in the works. 9 infusion centers will be able to see 1,350 patients a day because, like I said, it takes an hour or so to infuse this stuff. That's fewer than 7% of the Texans who test positive every day. This is not any kind of solution. And of course, Ron DeSantis' largest donor in Florida is the second largest investor in Regeneron, which is the company that makes this stuff. It's just amazing. If a great piece about this by Mark Sumner over at Daily Kos. He does some just brilliant writing there. If the treatment were given to all COVID-19 patients, the cost would be more than $80 million a day just for Texas and Florida. This is expensive stuff, thousands of dollars. And Mark makes the point, dangling the idea that a cure is available only encourages the spread. What we need is masking, social distancing, and vaccines. The chain of transmission has to be broken. Spot on. So let's pick up some of your phone calls here. Kevin in Durham, North Carolina. Hey, Kevin, what's on your mind today?
Hey, so everybody's piling on your guests, so I guess I'll do the same thing. So I listened to the segment. I guess the thing that drives me crazy is how they look at public health as an individual decision. And I don't understand why they think like that. I mean, I've heard this argument over and over again. Well, it should be left up to the individual. It should be left up to the parents. Well, why don't we apply that same logic to drunk driving and say, well, let's leave it up to the individual regarding drunk driving. Now, you see how crazy that sounds.
Yeah.
I mean, drunk driving is illegal because you're not just risking your health, you're risking everybody else on the road.
Yeah, it's an excellent analogy, Kevin. It was Margaret Thatcher who said, and Reagan tipped his hat to it, there is no such thing as society. There is only a collection of individuals. And that's, and that's.
I think that goes back. That probably goes back to their worldview and everything. Is that there's no society. It's just
right. No we society, just a me society.
I just don't understand it. I mean, this is the reason why we're not going to get out of this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I wasn't around during polio, but I mean, we got rid of polio because everybody got vaccinated.
Yep. I was around then, and I was a little kid. I was like 7, 8, 9 years old. I forget, which years it were, but it was. But I got the both polio, the sugar cube and the shot when I was in school as a little kid, and I don't remember any protesters out in front of the school. I don't remember angry meetings at the school board. But also I don't remember social media trolls from other countries, polluting Facebook, which didn't exist at that time. It was in the 1950s. Kevin, thank you. Thank you for your thoughts. Sarah in Mount Juliet, Tennessee. Hey, Sarah, what's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing today, Tom?
Good. What's on your mind?
Well, this goes to the point that you make almost daily, how important it is of who we elect locally, like school boards.
Yep.
I read a story where there are 2, I believe it's Texas, I may be wrong. If I am, somebody correct me, where there are 2 school boards who are defying Greg Abbott's
That's correct.
no mask.
Yeah, one in Houston, I believe, and the other, well, it's either Houston or Dallas, and actually I shouldn't say because I don't have a specific, I know, you're absolutely right. I know that that's happening in Texas. I don't know exactly where.
Well, they've also come up with a loophole to get around it because most schools have a dress code. So they are making a mask for these kids in school.
I saw that article this morning on Raw Story, I think it was, that they are adding the mask to their dress code. So, you know, you have to wear jeans, you have to wear a mask, you know, it's like, what a great way to do it.
I thought so too. And I just wanted to get that out there because I'm going to call my local school board and say, you know, this is what we need to do.
Yeah. And I think
it won't do me much. Go ahead.
No, finish your thoughts, sir. I'm sorry.
I was going to say it probably wouldn't do me any good because I live in a red state, but.
Well, you never know. I think that, you know, the earlier caller's comment that, what, you think that we should make an individual choice about whether we're going to drive before we drink before we drive is spot on. I mean, it's such a perfect metaphor for what's going on. Sarah, I need to move along, but thank you for the call, and thanks for your participation in our conversation. Mary Ann in Tampa, Florida. Hey, Mary Ann, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Jennifer Stefano had said that healthcare workers were not getting COVID as much, and why aren't they? And the response to that would be because they're wearing shields, because they're wearing a mask and a shield, because when they have any patient contact, they are gowned, mask, shield, gloves. They are doing what is required.
Well, and on top of that, I remember in the middle of last year when they hit the statistic that 1,000 physicians in America had died of COVID. I don't know what the number is now. I recall having seen something that said 2,000, but I'm reluctant to specifically quote that. But I know that at least 1,000 doctors in America have died of COVID.
Yeah. Yeah, and so doctors and nurses and staff, anyone involved has gotten it. But now they know. Now the nursing homes in Florida, one of the main ones that a friend of mine works for, once they had a positive case in their group, not in her nursing home, but in a group, they got the shields on again. Yeah. So, they are trying to do everything they can, and people are not preventing. Now Florida thinks treatment is the best. No, prevention is the best. Exactly. Treatment is absurd.
Yeah.
So, and it's so expensive, like you were saying. Regeneron is so expensive. And have they used that on children? Because they seem to be the most vulnerable right now. Yeah. Is Regeneron approved for children? I don't believe know. So. I haven't seen anything about that.
It only has an emergency use authorization, so I doubt that extends to children. But I don't know for sure. We
just have to protect ourselves.
Yeah. These are very, very big issues, and we need to deal with them. And your point is excellent. I mean, to go back to the fellow who said, it's like saying, it's a personal choice to drink before you drive. Well, it's almost like they're responding by saying, okay, well, we're going to make drinking, driving drunk, we're going to make that a personal choice. And what we're going to do is build more hospitals and more auto body shops to deal with all the car crashes. And we'll make some more funeral homes, too.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Mary Ann, thank you for your call. We'll be right back after this break. It's 45 minutes past 8. Excuse me. And welcome back. Kathy in Seattle. Hey, Kathy, thanks for listening to KBCS. What's on your mind today?
Oh, hey, I want to talk about the water situation. But before I say that, I want to say that I haven't heard anything about the Trump issue with him pulling out of Syria and leaving all the Kurds in the situation that he did. And I understand that this is more people and this is a bigger issue here in Afghanistan. But all of that stuff with the Kurds and the Trump is swept aside.
Yeah, that completely slid down the memory hole, didn't it?
Right, and maybe we need to start bringing that back up.
Yeah.
The other thing I really want to talk about with the water situation is that we are growing all kind of food for the rest of the world that doesn't support us, and I think it's time for us to pull our horns in about that.
Are you talking about all the soybeans we're shipping to China?
Well, that's one thing, but in particular what I'm talking about is all the animals, like Smithfield Farms and stuff like that the Chinese own over here on our soil. And they can dictate, they're going to be able to dictate later on who gets food if it comes down to that. And in the meantime, they're using our resources, our water resources for animals that are being shipped over there. And as a side note, a lot of them are slaughtered over here, so we get all the negative effects of all the pollution with the animals and all of that, you know. But the other thing is that we don't have any protection for animals that leave our soil. When they go over to foreign soil, they're left, you know, they treat them horribly over there. They're treated horribly on the ships that they're shipped on over there. And
do we export live animals? I didn't know that. I thought we only exported processed animals.
No, we do. And, you know, that's not right. We've fought hard for animal rights here in the United States, and then to just throw that all up to a foreign country and say, oh, now you can do whatever you want, like the chicken slaughterhouses and all of that stuff. Yeah. Anyways, I won't go on, but those are my points. So appreciate your program. Well,
thank you, Kathy. And I think we need to remember that, you know, in a pound of beef, there's I don't remember the exact numbers now. It was in one of my books years ago. I think it's in The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight. But there's something like hundreds of gallons of water to make 1 pound of beef. You know, I forget the number of acres, but it's an enormous amount of natural resources goes into that. And
absolutely.
And we never talk about it. You know, it's like it just kind of, you know, it vanishes. Kathy, thank you very much for the call. By the way, this is an amazing story. It's over at Raw Story. An anti-vaxxer known for pushing unsupported, dangerous sports medicines terrified Walmart workers in Missouri after threatening them with execution for distributing coronavirus vaccines. Christopher Key and other self-described vaccine police recorded video streamed live on Facebook as they confronted pharmacy workers at the Springfield store, this is in Missouri, where workers locked themselves behind the counter after being tipped off ahead of time by a concerned local resident and hid from the bellowing of this group of half a dozen anti-vaxxers, anti-maskers, you know, whatever. You are being put on notice, Key shouted through the door. And if you give one more vaccine as of this day after being put on notice, then you can be hung, you can be executed. Right. This guy, he describes himself as an entrepreneur. What they're doing here is violating the Nuremberg Code. He's literally threatening to kill these people. Or threatening them with death, let's say, more directly. It's nuts. It's nuts. Back with your calls. Right. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Over at the Thom Hartmann website, ThomHartmann.com, we have, you know, the full podcasts and there's just a lot of information, and our newsletter. And the newsletter is extraordinary. It's free. Sue puts it together every day with her stack, and it's just great content. Links to every single article that I talk about on the air, and things that are peripheral to them as well. It's really worth the effort. And then, of course, at HartmannReport.com, there is my daily rant, which is typically incorporated into the program, but it's a written version of it, and that's also something that there's no cost for that at all. So you can check that out as well. Also, we've got a new video up about the dueling memes. If at first you don't succeed, try again, or the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. Schumer is going to try to do what Harry Reid did in 2013 by forcing votes. Will it work? We'll see. Check it out at ThomHartmann.com. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, picking up your calls. Paul in Glenside, Pennsylvania. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. I'm trying to stay informed as a citizen, and, you know, with a major world event happens, you go to the big cable TV channels because they have somebody on the ground and they have cameras and they say, "Oh, look what's happening here." And I just have to say, over the last few days, trying to get informed about what's happening, with the fall of Kabul, the reporting is so wretched, the analysis is so weak. I can almost imagine these people are thinking that their dog died or something. Like hundreds of reporters all over Washington that are correspondents are taking it in that vein. I mean, the simple fact that President Trump negotiated for well over a year with leaders of the Taliban outside of the country. It just,
over the objections of the Afghan government and the rest of the international community.
But it proves that the Taliban had control over extensive portions of Afghanistan. Yeah. You don't negotiate with people who are government in exile living in Paris hotels. Right. This wasn't a phony government in exile. This was a
Trump ordered them released from prison. He released 5,000 Taliban prisoners, including the guy who's just declared himself president of Afghanistan.
Well, not only that, I wanted to just review because I saw this map that popped up on one of the screens, and it said control of Afghanistan by the Taliban early in the year. We're talking like in the first 60 days of Biden's presidency, and you have red for the Taliban, and you have gray for the government, and then you have like the contested areas. Well over half the country was either under the control of the Taliban or contested by them.
Right.
The only places the government had control were the big cities, and the biggest city, Kabul, people I don't think understand. That's the size of New York City. There's like 6 million people there. It's like 20% of the population of the whole country is there. And we only have 2,000 troops left. 2,000 troops. They got more meter maids in New York City than that. So what you see here is for years now, on the ground, the Taliban has controlled huge swaths of the country. And outside of the big cities, there was no government worth mentioning. No one's going to be fighting for a phantom government. Whatever failure there was or whatever weakness there was, it's been there for years. That's the whole point of Trump negotiating with the Taliban at all. They had already control over half the country. The only way out was a diplomatic coalition of the two major parties or a civil war. Well, the civil war lasted, 24 hours maybe, 36 hours? That was it. It's done. Yeah. But if you go on the news, you think there was a terrible failure of intelligence. Nobody knew. Well, of course they knew. You wouldn't negotiate with them for 2 years for an agreement.
Well, and here's the thing:
they controlled half the country.
Here's the thing that's not being pointed out, and I was pleased to hear Rachel Maddow on her program pointed this out as the only time that I've heard any. And now I don't sit in front of the TV all day long, so maybe other people have said this, but it was the only time so far that I have heard this pointed out very clearly and very specifically, and that is that after Donald Trump cut his deal with the Taliban leader on the phone, personally talking to this guy who had ordered let out of prison. After he cut this deal with these guys, with the Taliban then sent their people all across Afghanistan to talk with local Afghans who were members of the military, who were part of the government's forces, and said to them basically, Trump negotiated this deal on May 1st, 2021. America's going to pull out. And when they pull out, then we're going to come in. And when we come in, if you lay down your weapons, everything is going to be good. Just declare to us right now that you're on our side, or, things to that effect, essentially. And here we are. I mean,
Tom, I had a draft card for Vietnam. We saw this in Vietnam.
Yeah.
The exact same thing. At the very end, the entire country outside of Saigon and a couple of strategic areas were completely controlled by the North Vietnamese in combination with the people from the South, who they called the Viet Cong, who were really the Viet Minh, long-standing
They fought the
national
French, too.
patriots.
Yeah, basically the only lever that we had, the only thing that we had that bound people in South Vietnam to us was money. You know, we were paying troops, and it was a very poor country. And to a large extent, that's also true of Afghanistan and Iraq. And, we got bit in the backside really badly here in Afghanistan, and I'm wondering what's going to happen in Iraq.
Well, I think the big mistake is they think the rest of the world can be dominated from large urban centers like it is in America.
Yeah.
And you can't do it. These countries don't have the institution and the culture that allows, like a New York or Los Angeles, a Wall Street to take over the whole country.
Yeah, I'm with you.
That just doesn't exist in Kabul.
I'm with you. Paul, thank you for the call. And my apologies to the folks on hold I haven't gotten to yet. It's the end of the show. We will be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget democracy is not a spectator sport. It really does require all of us. We have to participate. This is our opportunity to make our country work. It really is an opportunity. And there's an election coming, so let's pay attention. Get out there, get active, tag you're it. Have a great afternoon. Be good to yourself and the people around you. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at hellofresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com. Annie's Kit Clubs, creativity delivered right to your door. More info at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. Wild Alaskan Company, delicious, sustainably sourced seafood delivered right to your door. More information at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. And Mack Weldon, reinventing men's basics. More info at mackweldon.com/Tom.